DIY, the ones that you have no business watching. And the thirst traps.
Wait a minute.
Fine, you can look at those. But start putting that algorithm to use.
Now with social media.
Follow us at Fox Sports Radio.
The big story of the day.
Interact with us at Fox Sports Radio.
We're asking you.
Find out at Fox Sports Radio. The most fearless voice in sports is on FS1. The one and only Colin Cowherd is bold, unique, and outspoken.
Wow.
You can see him on The Herd, weekdays at noon Eastern on FS1 in the Fox.
It is Fox Sports Saturday right here on Fox Sports Radio. Props to the crew. Bo Benson, trusted producer. Chris Burfett, technical producer. Isaac Lowenkron, crushing the updates, crushing life. Top of the hour, up on game. LeVar Arrington, DJ Hushmanzada, Plaxico Burris. They've got you covered. Before our picks, real fast, we don't have a lot of time, Rich. We want the Cliff's Notes version here. I saw a random post about how a movie inspired you to start playing football in the first place.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to play football until the 8th grade because my mom wouldn't let me. And oddly enough, the movie The Waterboy hit cable television. It was all over HBO the summer before 8th grade, and she finally relented. She finally allowed me to play football. And I was then nervous because I was a lacrosse player. I was about to try out for the football team, and I didn't know if I was going to be good. I didn't even know if I wanted to do it anymore because it had been for so long. Mom, you're not letting me. She was finally like, fine, you could do it. And so now it was my choice. The movie The Waterboy was all about how Bobby Boucher's mama didn't want him to play football because football is for the devil. And Coach Klein convinces him to play for the Mud Dogs, and they go and they win the big
Bourbon Bowl,
the big Bourbon Bowl, the championship game. So, if it weren't for Adam Sandler, I would not have an NFL career. I would have not played in the NFL because I'm telling you right now, that movie motivated me to have that tackling fuel that you need to go out there and play football. So it's amazing. A little embarrassing, but that's the exact reason why. That's where it all started.
It's an awesome story. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great little prequel to our rapid fire picks, huh? You wouldn't even be making rapid fire picks if it wasn't for the Waterboy. Let's dive into this.
Rapid fire.
All right, Jared, we'll start with you. What are you thinking, man?
Yeah, 0-3 last week, guys. It was my first stinker post-Super Bowl, but still 18-12, since football season ended. So we're still doing okay. Let's get back into the baseball vibes. I'm all Nerfies today. Guys, the Nerfie is 31-5 in the last 3 days. It has been low scoring early on in these games across baseball, and I think it's going to continue today. Maybe it'll switch today because we're on all Nerfies, but who knows? Marlins Athletics. The Marlins just traded Luis Ariz. They're a Nerfie team for all eternity now for the entire summer. And I like the pitching matchup today, especially Paul Blackburn on the other side for Oakland's been great. Rogers, one of the better pitchers on the Marlins staff. So we'll go Miami-Oakland Nerfie. How about we go Toronto-Washington Nerfie? A good Nerfie tip. I love pitchers that are facing a lineup for the first time. That is always advantage pitcher. You get that a lot with these interleague matchups now. Jake Irvin for the Nats today. He's never faced Toronto. Kevin Gausman on the other side for the Blue Jays. I'm not too in love with that Nationals lineup. I think Toronto's got the better chance to score, but we'll go Nerfie, Toronto, Washington. And finally, Giants, Phillies. No Trey Turner. Tweaked his hamstring the other night. Keaton Wynn throws really hard for San Francisco.
Evan Giddings, Dan Devone. This is Saturdays here on 95.7 The Game. We begin anew, Dan. I know it's not technically summer yet, but we're getting damn close. And as we transition away from everything that is specifically the Golden State Warriors, we're going to get into them. We're going to get into some of the Giants as we move along this summer. We got the San Francisco 49ers who just wrapped up a draft that you concluded last week, Dan, in fantastic fashion with their own Sterling Bennett. But where we begin today is first, what's going on, my man? How you doing?
Hey, how are you, my man? Let's do this. I'm looking forward to it. We'll get into the Warriors, but when when that door's open, and here's the word of the day, Jersey Ken, what's going on? We're going to get into a myriad of things there, Ev. Like, we're not just, you and I, we're just not, we'll talk Warriors if you want us to, but don't pigeonhole us, right? Don't put us down a hole, because we have a latitude of things that we can reach out and talk about, and that's where we're going from this point forward.
Exactly, but I think it does make sense to start with the Golden State Warriors, because as we kind of, get a lay of the land and sort of...
A perfect segue, and you drag me right back.
Well, I think for me, Dan, I mean, it's about the Golden State Warriors as it is as much about the NBA playoffs and kind of what we're seeing, right? Because, your New York Knicks, Ken's New York Knicks are moving on to the second round. I think there's a heavyweight fight that's beginning later tonight in the second round in the West between Denver and Minnesota.
Gonna be fun.
I cannot wait to watch what hopefully is a long,
always fun game.
Extended series. And it just kind of got me thinking about, what the state of our teams, the state of the franchises and where we're at and what these teams are trying to accomplish. And for the Warriors, to me, I think, it starts with measuring yourself with, ideally, I think the series that is tonight, because I think those two teams have championship aspirations. And I think if you're the Warriors and you're trying to figure out how far you are, like, that series is the gauge. That is the barometer.
I would agree with you. And I think it's also important to note that now that we've had a couple of weeks to sort of let this marinate and let this wash over us as far as the season, just get a little bit removed from the overreaction and the emotion that is the ebb and flow of an 82-game basketball season. Now I think it becomes a little bit more clear just where the Warriors fall as far as sort of the Western Conference and the NBA, as it were. And we have to keep in mind that the Golden State Warriors were a team that didn't even get into the play-in, right? And it was a team that was healthy. No excuses. They lost to Sacramento. Not only lost to Sacramento, they got boat raced by nearly 30 points to a team that, quite frankly, wasn't very good. They're not even part of the postseason picture. And so when you think about this team, I think all of us now should at least arrive at the conclusion that they're not a piece or two away. That, again, I always talk to you about this. This isn't a stretch 4 away from potentially being relevant.
The stretch.
This is a team, yes, exactly. This is a team that has to make wholesale changes, in my estimation.
Well, and so could the Warriors take a massive swing? When you say multiple pieces, they're not a stretch 4 away. That doesn't sound like a LeBron James or a Kevin Durant. It might be both, but it doesn't sound like, Dan, you believe that they are one massive superstar away. Because the one thing that I felt like we learned in this first round, Dan, was the era of these super teams, of these aging superstars. It's coming to a close. LeBron didn't make it out of the first round. KD didn't make it out of the first round. Paul George just got eliminated last night along with Kawhi Leonard and James Harden. Damian Lillard got eliminated yesterday. I mean, Jimmy Butler is out. All these guys that are in their 30s and closing in on 35 or north of that, all of these guys have no seat at the table when it comes to contention.
What have I been saying all along? This is no country for old men. I have said this repeatedly, that when it comes to the Warriors, don't look any further than you're just an old basketball team. I'm glad you started there, and I'm going to continue that. I'm going to hit that theme throughout the entire show today, and I'm going to bring it up from time to time, just in case some people are getting in the car at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. I'm going to remind everybody what it is that we're going to hit reset on this conversation, and I want you to throw me that alley-oop lob once again throughout the entire show, because that's where this all begins and ends, Ev. The 20-something-year-olds have stormed the gate, all right? The 20-something-year-olds have arrived. They've surrounded the building, and they're telling all the old men, they're telling all the mid-30-something-year-olds, listen, somebody gave Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards, a bullhorn, and he's telling you, please come out with your hands up and drop your weapons. It's over. There's a changing of the guard, and it's taking place in front of our very eyes. You know who the oldest superstar that's left standing right now in the playoffs? It's Kyrie Irving, and he's 32 years of age. Everybody else is out, and it's not coincidental. The young players have arrived. We're watching the transition unfold during these very playoffs.
We're seeing players that are either budding or already in their prime, or teams that are composed of players with budding superstars or already in their prime. And that's why, to me, Dan, there's been a lot of conversation this week about should you go out and get a Kevin Durant? Should you go out and try and court a LeBron James? Some people have thrown Paul George in there. There's other older superstars that could potentially be had. But to me, Dan, I think you're going to be left at the dance again. I think you're going to be late to the party once more if you continue to get older, to get more experience, to get aging players that have shown themselves to be Hall of Fame talents and had ridiculous careers and have won everything, and the accolades are longer than the list that's sitting here to my left that Bonte and Chasky put together. It's on the other side, Dan, I swear. That doesn't matter anymore. It just does not matter anymore. And I feel like the fact that a lot of people remain beholden to the past and remain stuck in what once was, you're right. You know, if I'm talking to Javier Bardem or Tommy Lee Jones, this is no country for old men. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. I just don't like it. I don't like where it's going.
What's the list all about, by the way?
Oh, I think on the other side they had a list of things for Ricky Pearsall to get into in San Francisco, which actually I would like to run by you later in the show because you are a San Francisco native, and I feel like you can, I don't know, put the finishing touches on this bad boy. How about that?
Sure. Yeah. Listen, just getting back to the youth movement, the idea, and I think I asked you this as we were coming into the studio, like what was the talk this past week about Kevin Durant? Because I got things to say, and it simply is, you got to be kidding me. If you think the solution is another old man on an already aging, slow basketball team, you are out of your mind. Not only Dub Nation, but the executives that pull the trigger on these sort of decisions, and I'm talking about Dunleavy and Kerr, you are out of your mind. Kevin Durant is not the answer. He just makes you statistically older, and that's the last thing you want. You have got to somehow get younger. Listen, if that one big star is Anthony Edwards or Chet Holmgren or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, then yeah, you're only one star away. But if it's an aging star that's clearly descending down the mountain as far as their career is concerned, then no, that is not the answer. Let me just reiterate, and I will do this throughout the show. Kevin Durant is not the answer, nor should anyone even entertain that you're getting any better with Kevin Durant coming back at age 36, soon to be 36.
Well, it was funny because I think it was yesterday, Ethan Sherwood-Strauss, and he used to cover the Warriors for ESPN, longtime media member. He was on with Willard and Dibbs, and he believes that the Warriors are not that far away. It sounds like you differ. And I don't think the Warriors are necessarily eons from where they want to get to, but I don't think they're close.
No.
I don't think they're in Denver or Minnesota's realm. And we're going to see what happens this summer, and there's always going to be shifting pieces, and that's why the NBA is the greatest soap opera in sports, in my opinion. But to look at this roster right now, to look at what we just saw and say they're not that far away, I'm curious if people feel the same at 888-957-9570. If we're talking about the state of the Golden State Warriors, how far are they away? Because I think that there is a title preview that's going to start tonight in Minnesota, or pardon me, in Denver.
Yeah, I think that when you watch what Minnesota has and what Denver has, and listen, I'll leave OKC in that conversation as well. And the Dallas Mavericks are a team that's ascending. Dallas is really interesting because, they needed some help at the trade deadline, and I talked to you about this, and they sort of just were very much under the wire as far as the players they went out and got, right? It wasn't necessarily the high-priced free agent. It wasn't a Bradley Beal midseason acquisition. It wasn't somebody that was of high note. But again, it was the P.J. Washingtons of the world, the Gaffords of the world, that made this team much, much better and put them over the. They're now a good defensive basketball team. I never thought I'd be saying that about Luka Doncic and company. But Dallas, there are a lot of teams, and it's not just relegated to the two, although they might be at the very top of the list when it comes to Minnesota and Denver. But there are a lot of teams. I mean, a multitude of teams that are young, athletic, and quite frankly, better than the Golden State Warriors.
This is from the 510, the Xfinity Mobile text line. Super teams still work. These teams just aren't super. They're senior teams.
Yeah, listen, man, you've got to do it another way. That anybody that thinks that the Warriors are a piece or two away, you're delusional. You can still craft something together, but you have got to get very creative, and you also have to come to grips that we are an old basketball team, and the only way to be competitive, not only in the West, but in the NBA, is to somehow keep Steph, and I'll let Draymond be Draymond for a little while, and get younger. Emphasize the youth and bring in more youth. It may be a year or two away, but that's the direction. It is not getting Kevin Durant and mortgaging the future for an aging basketball player, yet another aging basketball player. That is not in any way, shape, or form the answer.
There has to be a philosophical change. There has to be movement towards not just getting younger, but the other thing I think we're learning in this postseason, Dan, is that size matters.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you look at, and not just on paper, the average height, although there were 8 playoff teams in the top 15 of teams that are, as far as average height, tall in the NBA. But you look at Minnesota and Denver, those are young, tall, athletic teams. Boston has size, maybe not as much at the 4 or the 5 position, but they got 6'6" guys everywhere. They got wings everywhere. Oklahoma City, despite Chet Holmgren being a little, I don't know, short in the caboose, so to speak, he's still 7 feet. They still got wings that they spread around him. And I think what we're also finding out is you just have to be more versatile than ever. You have to have multiple styles and multiple ways to try and win games and combat opposing teams. And I think that the Warriors are not as versatile as they were even 2 years ago. I don't think this is a team right now that can look at its roster and say, these are players that can do more than one thing or multiple things at the same time. Each of their players beyond Curry, and I guess maybe Wiggins is someone you could throw in the two-way category if he's willing to show up, but they have players, in my opinion, Dan, that are either offensively geared or defensively geared. And when you look at the rest of the postseason with what now is remaining in the second round, there are players that play both sides, both ends of the court. And so it comes down to size, it comes down to youth, and it comes down to versatility. And those are the things, those are the pieces that you're talking about that I think the Warriors absolutely need to identify this summer, because they cannot continue moving forward, in my opinion, with how they've been operating the last 2 seasons, because that's the same reason that they're in this predicament where they missed the postseason now, and they've only gotten to the second round beyond the championship. I mean, they've missed the playoffs 3 of the last 5 years.
I couldn't agree more that there has to be a philosophical change, because they're still playing as though it's 2017 or 2018. That the key here is to have two-way players. They don't have any. Maybe Andrew Wiggins, but if you want to invest anything in Andrew Wiggins, good luck with that. But they don't have players that can go both ways. And they're still trying to play basketball, again, as if it's 2019 and these guys are in their late 20s as opposed to their mid-30s. Playing this motion offense and relying on threes and transition basketball works for the Indiana Pacers. It does not work for a team that, again, is in their mid-30s. Why? Because you can't get out and transition and play defense any longer. And look at the stats that support that. They're the worst transition team in the NBA, but yet they still play an up-tempo transitional style of play. And it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the structure and or the personnel now of that roster, which, again, is aging. They have to come up with another way to somehow come up with points and philosophically readdress the way they have done things. I'm a big fan. I know it's not as exciting, but the pick and roll, watch the Denver Nuggets, man. They do it to death with Jamal Murray and Joker. It's the best thing you have going right now since Stockton and Malone. Like, the pick and roll is still there for you. And for the Golden State Warriors, that's more suitable to a bunch of players that are now in their mid-30s as opposed to getting out on a break. Let's use a motion offense. Everybody flare and shoot threes, and the long rebounds will get back on defense. That doesn't work for this team, once again, that is all in their mid-30s now, that there's got to be a different way. Again, I'm a big fan of the pick and roll, but in order to be a pick and roll, then you have to buy into that. And I would say one thing when it comes to Steph Curry and recognizing how to play with Trayce Jackson-Davis, certainly Klay Thompson did early. Chris Paul did it better than anybody because he's the king of the pick and roll currently in the NBA, I think. But Steph Curry, I don't think, is still very comfortable playing with Trayce Jackson-Davis because that's not part of his repertoire. It's something that he's never done. So something there has to be, if you're going to retain some of these older players, well, then you're going to have to sort of switch the way you're trying to do things from an offensive standpoint.
And this is a question we'll broaden to the other teams in the Bay Area, but basically we just kind of want to kickstart what is the beginning of Saturdays with Evan Giddings and Dan Devone. We'll be here all summer addressing a myriad, as Dan likes to say, of issues, of topics, of questions. And what is the state of the Golden State Warriors? That's where we're starting today. 888-957-9570. Before we hit the calls, Ken, you got something. What's up, my man?
Yeah, I just want to comment with Dan. I like what you're saying, especially with KD and his age group. But what's interesting is that Draymond on the Draymond Green podcast show yesterday was talking about, he was kind of ripping into James Jones, the general manager of the Phoenix Suns, and how he was like, we need to maximize KD.
Yeah.
We need to maximize KD. And Draymond was like, well, he was maximized in Golden State. He goes, he was actually the best rim protector in the NBA, or one of the best rim protectors in the NBA when he was in Golden State. He goes, we maximized KD. I actually got a bunch of audio. We could play that later in the show if you like. But yeah, it's interesting how he's advocating almost in a certain way. He goes, you guys need to figure it out. But it almost sounds like maybe, he wants to rejoin with him. Who knows? But yeah, I don't think the Suns really figured out how to maximize KD.
No, that's a good point. And I think that what you have to keep in mind when you're talking about maximizing KD or comparing to what it is that he did as a rim protector with the Golden State Warriors, again, he was 27 years of age. That was 7 years ago. He was one of the better two-way players. I would also, by the way, on that same podcast.
He had two Achilles. What?
On that same podcast, it was funny because I listened to his podcast, so I get these notifications on my phone. And so I think it was the thumbnail or the title. It said Draymond reviews something to the effect, Pat Bev, or suggest what I'm thinking, wow, of all people to chime in on Pat Bev and how to handle that, he might be either the perfect guy to do that or the last guy in the room that's
he was like, he goes, Pat Bev, he goes, I know a thing or two about getting suspended, so you need to calm down, especially after losses.
No doubt. But just getting back to the Durant scenario of him potentially coming back, I can't tell you, and we can get into it, Ev, and I will tell you once again multiple reasons as to why that is a bad decision on the part of the Warriors.
I can understand why Draymond Green wants him back. I can understand why Steph Curry wants him back. I could understand maybe even why Joe Lacob wants Kevin Durant back. I wonder if Kevin Durant wants the Warriors back, and that is a whole nother conversation.
Well, that's a great point because he's not leaving Phoenix, I don't think.
Well, I don't know if he's going to leave Phoenix, but I just find it interesting that
he's under contract.
Of
Everyone
all places, well, they would have to trade for him, of course, and I think they could make that work. I mean, it would probably involve Wiggins, Kuminga, multiple picks. You find salary filler. Maybe you send Chris Paul. I'm not sure. I don't know how the numbers are going to pan out, but there is a way you could make it work. My question is if, and again, I think this also applies to other superstars too. I mean, let's say that Giannis Antetokounmpo was available. I don't think he's going to be. Let's say Joel Embiid was available. I don't think he's going to be. Why would those players choose Golden State over another trade destination? What right now, and this is kind of what we're getting to, the state of the Warriors, what about the Warriors makes you believe in them? Yesterday was the anniversary of We Believe. Do people still believe that this team has something left? Do they still believe that this is a team that can recapture magic, that can make a run, that can dark horse its way into title contention? Is that still something that people believe in? Because I think this summer is going to tell us how much the Warriors believe that they can do it. that they can get it done. Because if they go out and try and swing a trade for Kevin Durant, I think that signals that they do believe that they can compete for a title, because why else would you do it? Why else would you mortgage your future? Why else would you sell multiple parts and go back into the tax once more for multiple years? Because Kevin Durant has 2 years left. That aligns with Steph Curry. That is a signal to me that they believe that they can do it. If they don't, if they try and strip down parts, if they try and move under the luxury tax, if they try and become a cheaper version of themselves with also trying to compete, that signals to me that they are trying to move in a different direction. I think that that philosophical change is necessary now more than it has been perhaps at any point in this dynasty. But what do you believe? 888-957-9570. I do want to hit the phones, Dan, before we got to get to this break here. I know Gloria's been hanging on patiently in Bayview. Gloria, how are you? You're on with Saturdays here. You're on 95.7 The Game. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It is raining, and it's a perfect time to chime in. And I love this topic. I don't think Kevin Durant is the answer. I believe that the Warriors have to become more athletic. They need more size, more rim protection. Ironically, I really like Zubac. I know he may not be available, but I like someone like him. He can score in the paint. He can grab rebounds, kick it out. He does all the dirty work, and he would complement the wing players of the Warriors. Now, I do believe that the motion style of play, as was stated, they're playing like 2017 and 2024. They're going to have to switch it up. They need more athleticism and less, they need skill players like they already have, but they need to intertwine that with more athleticism. So I believe packaging up Wiggins and someone else. I'm not on the bandwagon of packaging up Kuminga yet, but they need more athleticism like a Kuminga to blend in with the skill players. Thank you.
Thanks, Gloria. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think they need to lean more into their younger guys. And even if, Dan, that means that there might be some leaner times, I still think they can be competitive if they move forward and operate kind of the way that they did the last 2 or 3 months of this season, which is to empower younger players, to ask Kuminga to do more, to ideally next season ask someone like Moses Moody, Trace Jackson-Davis, and Brandon Podziemski to do more. I would like to see those 4 younger players empowered with ideally whoever else you can try and bring in to bring down the average age of this roster.
I think next year, if you're looking at a starting lineup, just to get ahead of myself, it's Steph Curry, Moses Moody is at the 2, at the 5 is Trace Jackson-Davis, Jonathan Kuminga, if he's still with the team, is at the 3, and then whoever, I don't think Wiggins is with this basketball team. But the point being is that, yes, you have to lean in on the younger players. And it's not like, let me get them in the rotation, let me bump up their minutes. No, they have to start supplanting guys. You have to sort of invert all of this, that Klay Thompson now is out of the starting lineup, that you have to now, and you have to reduce the minutes of Steph Curry. Is no longer going to be the same player he was even in the early part of last year. This is a challenge. It really is for Dunleavy, because you're right. There's the flirtation with Steph Curry. As long as he's upright and as long as he's still on a basketball court, you're going to have somewhat of a puncher's chance. But it's how do you find players with an aging basketball team that fit into what it is that you're doing as far as trying to get younger, and having that piece or that player that you bring in not be a LeBron James or be a Paul George or be a Kevin Durant, somebody that's in their mid-30s. Like, this is where Dunleavy earns his money. This is, how do you keep this thing going down the tracks and still have an opportunity at making a deep run into the postseason, as well as having a future? How do you balance those two? It's not impossible, but it's going to take some doing. I've mentioned to you that, is there a player out there like that of a Jalen Brunson, where it's obviously not a high-priced free agent, but maybe somebody that's just playing right in the background in the wings of a Luka Doncic that just needs an opportunity to be unveiled, if you will. It has to be something along those lines as far as creativity, I think, when it comes to putting the Warriors back on track. Easier said than done. I get it.
It is, and that's why it kind of got me thinking in a way, and I do want to get into this on the other side before we got to hit a break here, but I think that, I don't know, Dan, the thing that I struggle with is how competitive they can be. And for example, you mentioned Moody at the 2. Does that mean that Klay Thompson is off the bench, or is he no longer on the team?
No, I think, well, again, this all comes down to dollars and cents. Can you play for $18 million? We'd love to have you. Can you be closer to 20? If you want to get upwards to 27 to 30 million, well, then have fun in the middle of Florida and living in Orlando. We just won't go there with you. There has to be some hardline decisions, again, when it comes to the Warriors, when it comes to this aging core. We want Klay because he's a shooter, but not at that price.
I mean, I think right now that, I guess, kind of is aligned with Klay, that there's a lot of overpriced players on this team, or players that are not playing up to their contracts currently.
By the way, Kevin Durant's $55 million next year.
He is, and that's why you'd probably have to get rid of someone like Klay Thompson, or you'd have to move Wiggins and Paul and package Kuminga. And I don't know how great people feel about that, because I guess I'll make this case on the other side. I'll make the case for Kevin Durant on the other side.
I'm going to crush you.
You can shoot me down if you like. But I do think there is some wiggle room here. And the more you kind of got me backed into a corner with all these different moves and these possibilities, the Warriors have a lot of freedom, Dan, but they got to make a lot of change. And I'm just not sure they're going to be able to do it over the course of one summer. So I'll make the case for Kevin Durant on the other side. I see you, Joe, in Burbank. I want to get to you on the other side as well. 888-957.
Can I give a tease as we go to the break?
Absolutely.
We have potentially one of the greatest stories that is unfolding here in the Bay Area that nobody's talking about, except maybe Ev.
Oh, that is a tease.
Oh, baby.
That is a tease.
Come on back.
We're going to be talking about that on the other side, and also the state of the Warriors. We'll get into the state of the Giants, maybe the state of the Niners a little bit. Right now, we're focusing on the Golden State Warriors. The state of the Warriors as the second round of the playoffs move on, begins tonight. I think it's a big gauge and a barometer type series between Denver and Minnesota. Are you watching that series? Are you measuring the Warriors against them? 888-957-9570. This is Saturdays with Evan Giddings and Dan Devone. Back after this, 95.7 The Game.
For the ones who work hard to ensure their crew can always go the extra mile, and the ones who get in early so everyone can go home on time, there's Grainger, offering professional-grade supplies.
Devontae and Shasky, God love them, put together a list of things in the Bay Area as a whole that you got to do. And I'm not going to lie, I don't know how long he's going to be here for, but that's a lot of stuff to fit into 4 years of a rookie contract.
My question to Bonte Hill and Shasky is, have they ever been in this? Do they just go from the studio straight to wherever the bridge and tunnel place they live? Do they go straight to the East Bay? Shasky's a local kid, right?
They're city boys, yeah.
What the hell is this? Ride a cable car? Who is getting on a cable car aside from my aunt from like Jersey who comes here, once every 15 years?
Shout out, Ken.
Eat chowder? No, listen.
Stop it.
My man. My young fella, new wide receiver, I'll tell you what you do. Walk to the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm telling you, man, this is like something that you would see for like if there was a bunch of people in Topeka, Kansas that were in their mid-50s in their white pants.
Easy on Topeka.
And they're heading to San Francisco and they're finding out things to do. Let me go to the Japanese tea garden. No one does that crap. Come on, young wide receiver, we'll go. I'll take you down to North Beach. We'll go to Golden Boy, get you a good slice. Next door is Gino and Carlos, which you know intimately well. Maybe we'll go to the bus stop on Union Street. The bus stop, which now, by the way, has a speakeasy. Did you know that?
Yes.
You can go upstairs, and there's a private little bar. We'll take you there. Balboa Cafe's right down the block. If you want to get it, listen, you want to go to the Golden Gate Bridge, we'll take you down to the Aquatic Cove, and you can jump into the water with the Dolphin Club. You ain't doing half of this crap. Come on, man. I mean, what is this? This is one of the most disappointing things I've seen out of those two.
Well, it is pretty appropriate for a tourist, but if Ricky Pearsall, look, he's a 24-year-old, he's got a multi-million-dollar contract. Let's get my guy out to the Valencia room, all right? Let's get him out to Grand, where my guy Justin Beltray was out there DJing last night. Let's get him out to a couple clubs, have him meet some nice people. He seems like a marina boy. He's got a nice fresh cut. He's got some tattoos. He'd fit right in as a young business professional. He'd fit right in the marina in Cal Hollow. Let's get him out, show him the nightlife, White Rabbit, everywhere.
Actually, he looks like more of your part of the world. He looks like more of a Mission, sort of that gentrified, where the tats walking down Valencia Street sort of works. Sort of that, Noah Valley pushing Mission. Yeah, that I don't know. Marina can be a little bit yuppified at times. It's like sort of those kids that just got out of a big college out on the West Coast. I'm gonna go live in the city for a couple of years before I go back to the burbs and raise 2.5 kids and drive, my station wagon. So,
and that's when you take the cable car. when you got 2 kids, when you got a family, when you got a wife, you take them to the aquarium.
Break out this list. When you're retired and you come back,
go to the aquarium.
Yeah, exactly. We'll give this list to you when you hit 45, and it might be applicable at that time. But you're not walking to Golden Gate Bridge right now. When you got the bag, you just grabbed the chicken, you got some money to burn, you're a good-looking kid, man. Come on, man. You got to come stronger than that, Bonte.
Yeah, I mean, look, God love all those activities. I've done a few of them myself. I'm looking at the House of Prime Rib. I'm looking at Santung, by the way, my favorite place out in the sunset. But
is the Kezar Club still rolling?
Oh, yes, it is.
See?
Kezar Pub.
Well, it used to be the Kezar Club, now the Kezar Pub.
No, the Kezar Pub, yeah, right there on Stanion, right next to the park. Oh, there's a ton of great places. I was over at Finnegan's Wake last night shooting some pool. Like, there are plenty of things to do as a young... I don't know if the guy's single or not, but he's coming from Florida. He probably knows how to have a good time. The guy wants to go and meet some people. Let's get Ricky Pearsall out to some clubs before we talk about what he's doing with his day, because the man has got to be 10 toes in the dirt, in the turf. He's working on running routes during the day. At night, let him let loose a little bit.
Yeah, no, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. You know what typically happens? None of these guys live in the city anyways. You know what was great about that Giants team that won the World Series their first, 2012? Is that those dudes were all, like, it might have been their second pad, but Lincecum, Pat Burrell, all those guys moved in on the Chestnut Street, and they got those little pads, those crash pads.
That's pretty sweet.
They were going hard on Union and Chestnut, like every Friday night. It was sort of a throwback to the days of the Oakland Raiders. For you Raider fans that can remember Ricky's Hyatt House back in Ken Stabler days, that's why that was that love affair, that small working community in Oakland, because those player twos and those guys used to drink with the fan base. They would hang out with the community. You don't see that anymore, except for that Giants team, which was sort of a throwback in a lot of ways. So there's a good chance that our young wide receiver is not going to be in the city anyways.
Well, I also think it's funny. Baseball.
And if he wants to know what's going on in Santa Clara, you get the wrong cat. I have no idea, man.
Yeah, South Bay, that is a different land. That is more than a stone's throw down. But it's funny because you can do that if you're a baseball player. I'm not sure if, well, maybe Ricky Pearsall, he's 6 feet, can kind of blend in a bit. The tattoos are going to stand out. But, yeah, if you're Lincecum, you're 5'10" with some locks. I mean, you look like a normal person. I don't know, say one of these defensive linemen that are walking around, I guess Eric Armstead's gone, but, Javon Kinlaw is probably going to get spotted down south at the marina a little easier than, say, the backup second base, Tyler Fitzgerald right now. The 2024 San Francisco Giants could go down to Union Street and walk away and have a good night. No one would recognize him.
No, it's a good stick. You're right. That's a good call. There used to be a pitcher. Because I'm very aware. So this predates you, but you should be familiar with the name Bobby Welch.
Oh, Bob Welch. Well, it was the 91 Cy Young?
Yes, exactly. With the Oakland A's, he was with the Dodgers, and then he also pitched with was he with the San Francisco Giants? I think he was with the Oakland A's.
Yeah.
Did he ever? I don't know. We can look it up whether he was ever with the Giants.
I think he was with the Giants.
He used to live in the city, and I remember when I was a young man, I saw him, and I was like, that is so awesome. He's like, yeah, I'm a city guy. This is where you represent the city. Did he play with the Giants?
No, just the A's and the Dodgers. But it was 1990. I apologize. 27-game winner. God.
Oh, yeah. He was the guy, man. Yeah. He had, he drank a little bit too much, but he was, live in the city. Guys that live in the city, hang out in the city that they play for, they're few and far between. Usually people who have money go to the burbs, right? That's just what you do. There's more real estate, more bang for your buck. I get it.
I think the only player on the Warriors that I know for a fact lives in the city is Kevon Looney.
Is that right?
Yeah, he lives in the outer Richmond, I believe.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he's nice and domesticated. Of course, it fits for Loon
for
Dog.
Kevon Looney. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we know that a close second might be Clay, right? In Tiburon, he's stone's throw.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think most people either live down on the peninsula, over the bridge, like Walnut Creek area.
Yeah, he was an East Bay guy at one point.
Who?
Curry. Yeah, Curry. Didn't Draymond live in the city?
Yeah, he was like Blackhawk. I mean, little further from the East Bay than,
I'm not saying Oakland.
Let's say Piedmont.
Yeah, I was thinking like Orinda Moraga area.
Curry.
Oh, he's in Blackhawk now?
No, I think it was in Atherton now.
Oh, okay. But, all those guys have houses down south, like in Laguna Beach.
Of course.
Yeah, they got like these crazy pads down in SoCal.
Oh, they got these Supermaxes. I mean, we're trying to figure out how to get another Supermax contract into the Warriors. You got to send one of these away. These guys are making big bucks.
Well, that's just it. When you're talking about, again, you want Kevin Durant, you're taking on $55 million for a guy who's 36 years of age, right? And I don't know. Do you really want to try and make that argument? Because I don't feel like crushing my good buddy Ed. But if I have to, I will.
It doesn't happen often, but we can do it.
I'll take a bullet for the team.
Before we do, Evan Giddings and Dan Devone here on Saturdays on 95.7 The Game. We were talking about the state of the Golden State Warriors. Joe in Burbank, thanks for hanging out. What's going on, Joe? Welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning, guys. You made me laugh so hard on the Ricky Pearsall stuff. That is great. Great material, the best. You guys are right on the money. Trading for an older player is not going to make them serious contenders. You're also correct, so correct on the style of play. They just can't play that style of play anymore. The team needs to add young quality two-way players through the draft. So they need to keep their draft picks and do everything they can not to move them. And I think most Warrior fans, really, that I talk to, they're ready to go through a rebuild and suffer through some tough times. I just don't see they just aren't in a position, and they're not going to get anywhere in their current state as they're structured. What do you guys think about that?
I think you're spot on, Joe. I think as they're currently structured, yes, they're not going anywhere. Might they be a playoff team next year? Might Draymond not get suspended? Might be able to grab, I don't know, Dan, if you put the ceiling at 3, maybe 4 more wins, that would get you to 49-50. That would put you in the top 6 seeds. But it's not as if they're going to run this thing back, in my opinion, and all of a sudden become a 52-53 win team that is going to be challenging for a top 4 seed.
No. In fact, they may head in the other direction, because as much as they're eyeing the teams in front of them that are getting better, because with every year, that's a good thing for teams that are getting experience and become that much closer to an NBA title. For the Golden State Warriors, it's the death sentence, but it's the teams behind them. Like Houston's scary young. San Antonio, you're not going to be beaten up on that team for very much longer, not with Victor Wembanyama. He's a player or two away from being a playoff contender, mark my words. Memphis is only going to get better. That's not to mention that all those teams that are in front of you. So the idea of getting older is just a non-starter for me. And I just got to address, because I just saw this, somebody on the text line, and this is a great point, on the Comcast text line, the 510, I lost it, but they were alluding to the fact, like, hey, Dan, you can't have it both ways. Last week, I was advocating for the drafting of Bronny James
yeah.
so that you can bring in LeBron.
Oh, Bronny's younger.
There you go. Yeah, Bronny's cheap and young, and that's the answer to getting back to the NBA championship. No, but listen, while I was proposing the deal, I'm not advocating for LeBron James. Don't conflate the two. I'm just saying, look, at Warrior fans, if you don't want to trade Jonathan Kuminga, Wiggins, and you want to keep the younger players, there's a way. I was just providing an avenue of how you can still be in that NBA championship potential conversation and not have to mortgage the future. It was sort of, I was having fun at the expense of drafting Bronny James. And let me just tell you something, because I'm glad they pointed that out, because, if I could do it all over again, I wish I never said that, because I very rarely will I advocate LeBron James. First of all, as a player, I recognize he's one of the greatest of all time, but I'm not a big fan of his. And I'm also the idea of him playing for the Golden State Warriors, like, he's the enemy, right? He played with Cleveland. Now he's in Los Angeles. Like, what was I thinking? I get that. But what further emboldened all of that, and I knew this going in, is that, first of all, grown men, I have like a very short list of things that are required in order for you to actually become a grown man. And one of which is you can't whine, all right? Grown men just don't whine. And all NBA players, for whatever reason, culturally now have adopted that they just whine no matter who you are after every play. But he takes it to a whole nother level. And I sort of forgot and lost my way and was just reminded of that in that game, since the last time I suggested the Warriors get LeBron James was that one game in which they beat Denver.
Yeah.
And he wanted the video replay. I don't know if you remember this, because the ball was clearly off the Denver Nuggets, but they said it was off of LeBron. He was right in front of the Laker bench, and he said, you need to replay that, right? He's motioning with his finger, replay that. They didn't do it quickly enough. They inbounded the ball, and Denver scored. He threw one of those temper tantrums where I'm looking at him like, you're the greatest of all time. He's on his knees. He's screaming just like a kid who's told you can't go to, what's the place where what in Buster's is it?
Dave & Buster's?
Yeah, you can't go to Dave & Buster's this Saturday, little Ev, and you just throw this little temper tantrum. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm out on you, bro. You can't play for the Warriors. And I know you might be the greatest of all time statistically, but Michael Jordan would never do that. I'm sorry, man. The complaining and the whining and the crybaby-esque LeBron James reared its ugly head. I'm like, God, I wish I never mentioned that on the air at 95.7 The Game. So good stick there by the 510. But yeah, I wish I could take that back if I could.
We hold people accountable here on Saturdays. I mean, from 9 to noon. It is what we do. But I got to ask, Dan, so it sounds like, and I don't believe you want either of these two players on the team, but if you had to choose between Kevin Durant and LeBron James, if there was a player that the Warriors would be able to swing a trade for or court, it sounds like you'd lean towards the Slim Reaper.
Who's that?
KD.
The Slim Reaper.
Durantula.
Okay, well, it just depends on what is it that I'm giving up to get either one of these players.
Assume that the trade is the same for both. Yeah. It'll be Wiggins, Kuminga, salary filler, could be Chris Paul, could be other pieces, some sort of salary filler, multiple first-round picks. That's the trade. It nets you either of those two players.
Yeah, first of all, you're out of your mind to pull the trigger on that. But for the sake of this conversation, yeah, it's Kevin Durant because he's almost, 4 years younger?
I mean, they both played about the same amount of games, I think.
Yeah.
They averaged the same amount of points and percentage-wise. I mean, they were both really damn good in their first-round series. One won one game against Denver, and the other got swept.
Yeah, no, I'm going Kevin Durant, just to answer the question. But again, there's no way that I would ever, in a million years, if Kevin Durant was to call Steph Curry and Steve Kerr and saying, okay, let's talk, I'm open to this. Because those three are going to be reunited, obviously, with the national team in the Olympics this year in Paris. So they're going to opportunity to court him and just say, hey, what are you thinking, man? Do you want to come play for us? If indeed that is what they want going forward.
I'm glad you brought that up. If
he's on board, even if he was on board, if I have the ability to veto that, I'm Joe Lacob, I'm like, no, are you guys out of your mind? No.
No. 888-957-9570. This is a fun one from our YouTube chat powered by First NorCal Credit Union. We got people filing in here on a Saturday morning with Evan Giddings and Dan Devone. This is from Matthew, I believe it's Nath or Nathy. I apologize for the mispronunciation. Lose CP3, Dan, and get KD. Technically, you've gotten younger.
Give it to me again?
If you lose CP3 and you bring in Kevin Durant, technically you've gotten younger.
Yeah, it's clever.
Yeah,
it's
tongue in
clever,
cheek.
but I think you know what I'm talking about.
Okay, Dan, feel free to get out, I don't know, your Gatling gun, the howitzer, whatever you're going to use to shoot me down, because I got to make the case for KD.
Shout out Chris Gatling, by the way.
Shout out Chris Gatling.
I'm a Warrior.
The reason why the Warriors should trade for Kevin Durant is because he is still a highly productive player. We know he fits with the Warriors. And if he is willing to let bygones be bygones with Draymond Green, I don't know if there's a way that the Warriors can get significantly better next season and specifically the next 2 seasons, because all I care about right now is the remainder of Stephen Curry's career in Golden State. And while I think he'll probably re-up after his next deal, he's got 2 years left. You know who else has 2 years left? Kevin Durant. Draymond Green has 2 years left and a player option. Steve Kerr has 2 years left after his extension that he signed during this season. Everything to me would align by putting, yes, aging superstars, multiple of which did not make the playoffs on the Golden State Warriors. Kevin Durant didn't win a game in the first round against the Minnesota Timberwolves. But together, to me, they give the Warriors their best possible shot to see if they can win number 5 with Curry. We've seen it happen before. I understand it was 5 years ago. Since then, Kevin Durant has been searching for a team to call his own that he can compete with, and the closest that he's gotten is the Brooklyn Nets. But bringing him back to Golden State, even mortgaging Kuminga, which would have to be involved, sending out multiple first-round picks, that to me, if you are to maximize Curry, if you are of the maximize Curry camp of get Curry number 5, that is the reason that you trade everything under the sun for Kevin Durant. You bring him back, you allow the chemistry to run rampant, and then you figure out if that is something you can do. And you, by the way, if it doesn't work, you have a built-in out. You have a built-in reset button. You have a built-in rebuild button that is in 2 seasons. And you turn this Golden State Warriors team that was not a show last season into a circus, into the biggest show in the NBA, and all the eyes are back on you. You got an all-star game coming to Chase Center next season. You put the limelight on the Warriors. That's why you go get Kevin Durant.
Wait, just let me back up for a bit, just so that I fully understand what it is that you just said. What's the reset in 2 years?
The reset is Curry and his contract being up, Kevin Durant's contract being up, Kerr's contract being up, and Draymond Green left with a player option.
But are you saying that that's a good thing?
I'm saying that that's a natural inflection point to choose whether to reset this and rebuild this entire thing or to potentially lean in further and try and see what you can do. Curry's going to be, 38 or 39 at that point? I think that it's probably too much to expect him to still be carrying this franchise. And what did we learn more than anything else this season, Dan? He needs someone else to shoulder the load. He needs someone to help him on offense. And who better right now? I know Kevin Durant's also 36 years old. He's the same age as Steph. He's on season 16 or 17, but he still averaged 27 points this year on 50+% shooting, nearly 40% from three-point range. He is still a deadly offensive option, and while he's not as good as he once was defensively, Draymond talked about the rim protection, I don't think he offers much of that anymore, but I'm also looking what you're getting from your starting 3, from your starting 4 this season. Wiggins and Kuminga, the ups and downs, the roller coaster rides. To me, Kevin Durant is a much more consistent option, even at an extended age, than either of those 2 players, and that's why I'd be willing to move both of them to bring in a guy to help Curry try and get back to the mountaintop.
I don't know where to begin here. All right. Well, first of all, let's just start with this idea, because I hear a lot of this, that on paper, Kevin Durant is still a productive basketball player. And I believe he may have played the most minutes since early on in his career, maybe his 3rd or 4th year this past season. He was somewhere close to, 38 or 40 minutes a game. And you look at the points, close to 27 points a contest. You're right.
He played 44 minutes in the elimination game.
Yeah, no, and he plays, he's nearly 40% or over 40% from three this year. All real numbers. And this is the problem, is that I would just suggest everybody, aside from the playoffs, watch him during the regular season and even watch him throughout the playoffs. He is not the same guy. And this is the problem with aging basketball players. I could show you Klay Thompson's stat sheet. Klay Thompson was nearly 18 points a game. Klay Thompson was close to 40% from three-point range, as I talked about in terms of efficiency, number 4 overall in terms of three-point shooters in the NBA this year. If you were to look at his stat sheet, one can draw the conclusion that, hey, Klay Thompson, yes, let's spend $30 million on this guy because he can still shoot it. Look at these numbers. These numbers are pretty solid for a guy that seems to be getting a bad rap out there in San Francisco and the Bay Area. But for those of us that follow Klay Thompson, we know that it's not over and that he's trash, but we recognize the holes. Those of us that have followed this guy on a game-to-game basis, you recognize that he's an aging, limited basketball player right now. In fact, Klay Thompson in that last game, I think, was really emblematic. That last game against Sacramento, not because he didn't score any points. That was about as bad as it gets. But if you saw him in the post-game conference, did you see he had that fat lip? He split his lip in that game. It, to me, was the poster of who he has become currently in the NBA, because I remember distinctly when he took the ball in the face. He was trying to snatch a rebound or a pass, and he couldn't move his hands quickly enough, and the ball hit him squarely in the face, and he's flailing his arms like an old man. A younger Klay snatches that ball, right? But it hit him squarely in the face, and there he is in the postgame, just with no points, his career at the Warriors potentially over. He's got this fat lip, and I'm like, that's just an ugly look for an old player. And that's who he's become to a certain degree, although he can still, as we know, he can still light it up from time to time. And you could make the same mistake with Kevin Durant. When you show me those numbers, the problem is, if you don't have the legs to rotate defensively, if you don't have that energy to get up and down the floor, if you don't have the ability to block shots, if you don't have that youthful energy, is where the league is at, then those numbers are baseless to me. And I understand that people think he's still Kevin Durant. He is not. Just like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green are no longer those players. This is not 2016 or 2017. We are not going to the Hamptons to bring this guy in. Everybody is no longer in their late 20s. These guys are now in their mid-30s. And the idea of trying to go in the rearview mirror and revisit 2017 is the worst mistake you could make. You have to go forward and get younger, and Kevin Durant's not the answer.
But the point about Klay Thompson, I hear you, that he's still a serviceable player. He still has his moments.
Sure.
All of his numbers are down from his career averages. I mean, you can just see the decline, not just in his play when you watch the game. You just look at the box score. I mean, everything has gone down. Last year was the most threes in the league. This year was 5th. The percentages dipped below 40%. I think he's a career 41% three-point shooter. KD played more minutes per game than his average for his career this year. He averaged just about as many points. He shot above his career average from the field. He shot above his career average from three-point range. He was right at the same free throw percentage. He averaged just as many rebounds as he typically does. He averaged slightly more assists than he has for his career. It's not as if they are the same. I know that they underwent the same injury in the Achilles. Klay Thompson also has the ACL, obviously. But Kevin Durant has bounced back, in my opinion, Dan, better than we've seen anybody from this injury. And while the defensive side of the ball is the biggest concern for me, no matter who you bring in, I think the Warriors just right now defensively are not good enough to compete at a high enough level. But I think that what Kevin Durant brings from the offensive side of the ball is where the Warriors struggled too much consistently this year to figure out how to get easy shots. And who is someone that can bail you out of a possession? There was nobody that could do that this season. Even Curry, for the last 3 months after the All-Star break, his points were down. He could not get a shot off consistently enough to carry the Warriors, and did not have a secondary option that was there every single night. It continued to rotate. Some nights it was Klay, some nights it was Wiggins, Kuminga. We know that Kevin Durant entering Chase Center, if he wants to, is going to be a number 1 or number 2 option on a given night And for someone who also played 75 games this year, Dan, I just think that there's more of an emphasis for the Warriors right now on the regular season than ever before. And yes, there might be some problems in the playoffs and the postseason. They got to get there. Again, they have not made the playoffs 3 of the last 5 years. It might be Operation Championship for some teams, and if KD comes here, there's a big expectation. But to me, it's Operation Playoffs. That's where I need to see the Warriors back next season. I think Kevin Durant absolutely puts them there. 888-957-9570. If you want to shoot down my argument for Kevin Durant, if you want him here, if you want LeBron James, if you're with Team Dan Devone, I want to hear from you at 888-957-9570. I see you, John. I see you, D, out in D.C. We'll get to you on the other side. This is Saturdays with Evan Giddings and Dan Devone. We roll along on 95.7 The Game after this.
Hey, John, why so glum?
I just got let go. The company's downsizing. This is the 3rd time in the last 2 years. I'm done with this.
Have you thought about My Computer Career? I've heard they can train you for a career in IT.
Now back to 95.7 The Game.
What do you got, Dan Devone?
So this just dawned on me. We were talking about play-by-play, as we often do, because Evan Giddings is a rising star. Should I go through the spiel? Keep an eye on this kid because he's on his way.
Thank you.
So it was about 6:58, and I'm listening to a Giants show with 100 Pence, and I don't know if it was just me, but he dropped a full-on F-bomb.
Wait, when?
On the air last night.
Flabbergasted?
And I couldn't, did I just hear that correctly? And you could tell there was sort of an awkward pause. And he was getting wrapped up emotionally in sort of what it is that he was talking about. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, we didn't catch that. Whoever was, playing Jersey Ken out there with whatever station that might have been.
Well, I don't know if it's a take necessarily, but if there are curse words per sentence used by athletes, baseball players by far curse the most of any athlete, in my opinion.
Oh, wow.
Because the thing is, when you are around this like kind of anarchy that is the clubhouse, you're around dudes all the time. Baseball players are also notoriously gross. They kind of got quirky, weird things that they got going on, especially shout out to my left-handed pitchers. They all together create this really, it's not a fraternity type deal, but it's just, it's really hard to explain that when you spend so much time just around dudes for 6 to 8 hours a day for 6 straight months, it just becomes second nature. Like, you learn how to curse when you get into a locker room. I think Ozzie Guillen talked about this, former manager for the White Sox. Like, when he was learning English, the first words that he had to learn were curse words because that's all that the American players were talking about. There's an F-bomb every other sentence, S word this, B word that, P word that. Everything is revolved around cursing. So it doesn't shock me at all that Hunter Pence inadvertently dropped an F-bomb, although I think it's funny that no one else caught it besides you.
Well, it brings me to sort of the Bob Costas first interview with Ichiro. And he said, have you learned any English? And he said, since I've been in the United States, he said, yes, I've learned one phrase, Kansas City in the middle of August is hotter than 2 dogs
making love
in a pair of socks. It was funny for him to drop the F-bomb, which immediately he had acclimated to. I did an interview with Tommy Lasorda, who was, remember Tommy Lasorda? Just passed away?
Yeah.
Dodger legend, yeah. And so he was a ceremonial coach at an all-star game, and I had access to the field, and my interview was actually going out PA all over the stadium. And we had this interview, and then the minute the interview finished, he and I continued a conversation about food. I called him Tommy Lasagna. I'm like, Tommy Lasagna, man, I'll get you some Italian food. Every word, after we were no longer being heard throughout the entire stadium and we were off the air, and it was just he and I talking, you're right, F-bomb this, F-bomb that, this F in place is better than that F. I was like, holy Christmas, Tommy. Like, everything had it was, from that point forward, I called him, Tommy F. and Lasorda. It was crazy. And we took it to a whole nother level. By the way, go on.
No. I was just going to point to the managers might be the biggest culprits in the clubhouse. I mean, the players are foul-mouthed as it is. They curse like sailors, but the managers have been doing it for so long. It's just natural.
So speaking of baseball, you ready for my tease?
Okay.
So I had a tease that I think that the greatest story that's unfolding in a long, long time is happening in front of our very eyes, yet no one's paying attention to it. And I know you are, but for whatever reason, you're looking at me with these dumbfounded eyes because you don't know where I'm going. Ladies and gentlemen,
I think I do.
May I just remind you that as much as we want to focus on this, do we want to get into the San Francisco Giants? Why not?
I mean, look, we will get back to the Warriors. I see you, Kevin and Fremont. I see you, Gene
we'll
and
get back
Oakland.
To the Warriors.
We will. But the floor is yours, Dan.
All I want to say, we'll take up the baseball talk maybe later in the show. Let me just throw this nugget at you. The team with a better record than the San Francisco Giants, the team that's one game from 500, that has a $45 million payroll, the hell with Moneyball.
That's a lot.
This is the storyline, and I'm talking about the Oakland A's. Ladies and gentlemen, there is something that's happening that might be the greatest story. Bring back Brad Pitt and Seth Rogen. Forget about the 2002 season.
Jonah Hill.
If this team, Jonah Hill, not Seth Rogen.
Yeah, same guy.
If for some reason this team gets in as a wild card at a $45 million payroll. Shout out, is it Mike Mason, the closer?
Mason Miller.
Mason Miller. Best thing since Dennis Eckersley. I am telling you, man, there's a story that's brewing, and nobody gives a rip because they play in front of 2,500 people every night.
I was one of those 25 people last night.
Thank you. I knew it. And you had no idea where I was going with that, did you?
Well, once you made the initial tease, and I was kind of wondering, okay, I was going on the list of stories and things around the Bay, and then I started to think, the greatest story, because I think, honestly, the most dominant athlete right now that's playing, I mean, the Warriors are done, the San Francisco Niners still have yet to start their season. The most dominant athlete of the Bay Area right now is Mason Miller. And I thought it was really interesting that Dallas Braden, who does the A's games, but he's got a pretty good pulse on pitching, historical facts, and the rest. They asked him, who was the last A's pitcher that was as dominant or in the same category as Mason Miller? You know who he said?
Who's that?
Vida Blue.
Wow. The Blue Blazer.
Yeah, the guy threw 200 innings or 300 innings, struck out 300 batters, and was it 1971? He won the MVP and the Cy Young or something like. That's a guy that is. I've only heard stories about it. He's a myth. That fastball is something that is indescribable from everyone that had a chance to see him pitch. And Mason Miller is. I saw him on Tuesday night when he shut out the Pirates in 3 straight innings. Actually, this is funny. You would love this. So we've talked about the statistic FIP before, right?
Yeah.
Fielding independent pitching.
Yes.
Mason Miller is the first pitcher that I have ever seen or even heard of this being a fathomable fact. His FIP is negative.
No way.
It is negative 0.14. That means, mathematically speaking, if he pitched an entire game and the A's got shut out, that they would win. That's how good he's been.
We're starting the Mason Miller chatter right here. T-shirts, please get printed. Mason Miller has started right here on 95.7 The Game for those of you that have no idea who this man is. And here's the other thing. So as I'm coming back from a little happy hours where I thought I heard what I heard from 100 Pence, I want to hear the A's game. Oh, let me check in on the A's. Where the hell are they? I think you got to go to some dude's house out in Oakland that lives right by the stadium and go in his basement and get on an iPad or something and listen. I mean, we don't want to promote another station, but do they have a broadcast?
Last I checked, they were on like a Christian rock station or some sort of, I don't know, religious news.
Yeah, it used to be. I actually used to work for that station.
Oh, did you?
But they got rid of them. They didn't want to go to terrestrial radio anymore. So then they went to just web player.
All audio, like the A's Cast or whatever?
Yeah, and then they went back, and I think they're with Bloomberg, if I'm not.
So they're not in conventional radio.
They are now, but at one point they weren't. So they were in a transition period from terrestrial radio. It was so
That's
weird.
part of the story. That's part of the storyline, a $45 million payroll. Keep in mind, Shohei makes, $70 million a year?
I was going to say, he makes 2 A's rosters, essentially.
$45 million. The San Francisco Giants are paying upwards to $200 million, I want to say.
Top 10.
North of $200 million, and that team does not have as good a record as the Oakland A's. Mason Miller, baby. Mason Miller.
To make your case even more,
pretty
Dan,
credible.
Bruce Jenkins of the San Francisco Chronicle, he wrote a headline yesterday. It says why Mason Miller and the A's are the most fun thing in baseball nobody will see.
Oh man, we're
that nobody cares about.
We're getting on. We're starting that wagon right here, man.
We got to get you out to a game, Dan. I'm telling you that. It's not bad. Not bad at the Coliseum.
Well, you sit wherever the hell you want, right?
Well, I mean,
it's like being at Golden Gate Park at Big Rec.
I'll take care of you. We'll get you down right behind the dugout, right behind home plate. It'll be all good. You can watch Mason Miller throw BBs past batters that can't see the ball. It's one of those things where, it's basically a Major League movie at this point. I mean, or the movie Major League. I mean, that's what they're trying to put together here. The only thing that's missing is Harry Doyle in the broadcast booth. But he throws so hard, it's almost like he throws the ball, the batter takes a step, looks back, and the catcher's throwing the ball back to the pitcher. I mean, nobody can hit him. It's unbelievable.
Let me ask you a serious question.
Yeah.
If I'm out in the bleachers, let's see, I'm in the left field bleachers, and you are, let's see, behind the A's dugout.
Sure.
In between innings, if I stood up and said, "Hey, Ev, what time's the show Saturday?" Would you be able to hear me?
Oh, I might actually. It's pretty cavernous. Depends on the wind. I think if it was carrying sound back towards home plate, I'd be able to hear you. I'd certainly be able to see you. I could pick you out. I'd be able to spot you out there. God love our bleacher creatures, but yeah, Dan Devone would be right there front and center.
That is too much.
That's bright colors.
If they have any shot, the only thing is I don't think that team can hit. You've fallen much closer than I don't know how they're getting this done. I think it's all pitching, and it's all Mason Miller because they can't hit with a lick, right?
No, they have some pretty poor batters as a whole. They have a couple of, interesting position plays. But it's interesting to bring the Giants into this. The biggest difference between the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants, why the A's have a better record, it's because of their bullpen.
Yeah.
The Giants have, or had, before yesterday, the third worst bullpen in baseball. I think it was like a 5.16 ERA or something like that. The A's, meanwhile, have not lost a game that they have led after 7 innings. That's why they win, is because both Miller, along with Lucas Erceg, their other flamethrower that throws 100 miles an hour, saved the game last night. Those two guys have been unhittable. Meanwhile, the Giants, outside of Devone, don't know who's going to come out of the bullpen and be able to miss bats. So both of their offenses are pretty paltry. The A's, I would say, is by far worse. But the bullpens are where the Giants have won. The A's have.
I got another random baseball stat for you, and then we'll get back to the Warriors because I know nobody gives a rip about
baseball
this stuff.
stats. Sorry.
Oh, I know. The Colorado Rockies, which are just pitiful once again, have trailed in all 33 games this year. They have never led this entire season.
That's pretty incredible. That is pretty incredible.
Crazy.
Oh my God, that is borderline treasonous.
That's nuts.
That's unbelievable. They have not led in a game.
No, not this entire season.
Well, to bring it back to the NBA playoffs. I think it was. Because some people are talking about how far the Lakers are away from the Nuggets, and there was a couple of games that were pretty close. I think the Lakers led for more minutes in the series than the Denver Nuggets did, but they were just so good in the fourth quarter and the second halves of games that it didn't end up mattering. And that's really where, if we kind of put a bow on the baseball conversation, we'll table that, bring it back in a little bit, and switch our sights to the NBA is, how do you match up? How do you stack up? And that's why I do think that the Kevin Durant move, Dan, makes sense. What did we learn this year about the Warriors? I think the most consistent part of their team was their second unit. And maybe that's a reflection of their budding talent, of their up-and-coming young players, but their starting five was such a roller coaster ride throughout this year that I never felt like against a Denver, against a Minnesota, hell, even if against a Dallas team that's moving on to just beat the Clippers last night. The Warriors starting five is not good enough. The Warriors' 5 starters that they trotted out, even going 27-12 the last 3 months, that starting 5 is not good enough for me to feel confident in them getting and competing in a postseason. Kevin Durant, you bring him in, you automatically elevate your starting lineup into a different echelon, into a different stratosphere than the one you had this season. And that's another reason that I would move the farm to bring in Kevin Durant, because I do think in the immediate, he makes you the most competitive team possible, and that's what the Warriors are trying to accomplish.
Well, when you say move the farm, just keep in mind that farm is not only going to include Jonathan Kuminga and Wiggins and Chris Paul, because Phoenix does need a point guard. One of the stupidest things the Suns ever did was to move Chris Paul. By the way, what happened to the Suns? Wasn't it just the other day that was like the young, sexy team with Cam Thomas and Bridges, and you had all these young players, and DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker. They just went to the NBA Finals against Milwaukee, and all of a sudden they're just crap overnight. Like that's when, well, their owner, Matt Ishbia, is a complete moron. We'll get into that later.
He's a nut.
But that aside, the reason why Kevin Durant wouldn't work, because it's not only giving up Wiggins. Because if I'm Ishbia, first of all, I don't think is trading Durant. Durant is under contract. I don't think that there's any way he's going to move Kevin Durant. But let's just say, for the sake, again, of this conversation, he's going to want everybody. And so Wiggins and Kuminga aren't going to suffice, nor are just your draft picks. I want your kids as well. I'm going to want either Podziemski or Trace Jackson Davis, and or maybe both. So just keep in mind that these kids are also on the table if you're talking about a trade with Kevin Durant. And so if it doesn't work out with Kevin Durant, say a year from now or 2 years from now, well, then what do you have? So I just get back to...
It's a good question.
I get the fact that he puts up numbers. He can still score the basketball. I am not arguing that. I'm arguing what I would say the problem is is that they're an old basketball team that just got older. And while you could say the same thing about Klay Thompson to a certain degree and the same thing about Draymond Green as well as Steph Curry, still good basketball players, still can dominate defensively. But as we know, following this basketball team, there is something that's missing. There's something amiss, and that's the reason why they got bounced and weren't even in the playoffs and got bounced from the play-in. It's because they are too old now, that they can no longer get to their spots as frequently. They can no longer defensively get on the floor. You know who leads the team on breaks? Just watch the Warriors. Every single time. Just watch from your TV. It's like the Kentucky Derby. By the way, shout out, of course, the first weekend in May, going off in a couple of hours, Churchill Downs. But it's like the Kentucky Derby. You know the first three finishers on a break that doesn't involve Steph, the ball's not in Steph's hands? It's Pajemski, it's Moody, it's Kuminga, it's even Trace Jackson-Davis. Those guys are all sprinting one end line to the other. And then trailing, coming into the picture, it'll be Draymond Green, it'll be Klay Thompson, it'll be Steph Curry. Because they're picking their spots. That's what older players do now. They don't load manage by not playing in a game. They load manage throughout the course of the game. They're like, I'm not going to go hard in the first quarter. Maybe I'm going to pick my spots. That's what LeBron James does to perfection. He's created an art out of this. Whereas if you're young, you play with your hair on fire and you go end line to end line for the full 42 minutes or the 35 minutes that you're playing. When you get older, you have to pick your spots, and that's when you become susceptible. So you have to look a little deeper when you're talking about an aging basketball team. And Kevin Durant makes them older, and while he can still put up numbers, they are still very, very vulnerable. And I don't think it makes you any better if you're bringing back the core and another old basketball player.
I think it would make you better, and I think there's a reason why the Suns would trade Kevin Durant. But I do want to get out to our callers at 888-957-9570. If you're with Dan Devone, I want to hear from you. If you don't think Kevin Durant's the answer, we want to hear from you as to why. If you do think that he can help the Warriors, I think there's a case to be made, and I'll lay that out in a second as we get to Kevin in Fremont. What's going on, Kev? You're on with Evan and Dan Devone here on 95.7 The Game. How are you?
I'm doing well. Kevin Durant, while he may not be all that he was several years ago, would make the Warriors better. But if you're not going to trade for him, I'll look forward to hearing your answer as to how they're going to get him and whatnot. You can't. I'm tired of hearing about Kuminga. Actually, he's a great athlete. He's not yet a great basketball player, and my whole point to this is they need to get better quicker. And so that's why Durant makes sense. If you're going, there's only three players. Moses Moody, as far as I'm concerned, even though he didn't get a great amount of playing time, is a better basketball player. You have Brandon Brzezinski, better basketball player. You have so if you want to build around those, I have no problem with all that. I wouldn't have Kuminga as part of that. But my whole thing is I make a deal and ship him off either before he gets injured again with his knees, which I don't think are going to hold up very long in his career. And I don't think Curry, once you signed Kerr to a longer contract and you have Curry for another 2 years, you kind of married yourself to being competitive right now. And I don't think Kuminga, for example, is going to be ready to join him on that athletic level. And if you don't want to have an older player come in, then you need to find a way to get a younger player to come alongside those two, and with Draymond Green, and I know Kerr doesn't play, but Kerr's going to want to play veteran players, and he just now got married a little bit to Brandon Brzezinski. He liked him. He liked Moses Moody, and he liked Trace Jackson-Davis. But those aren't going to be enough right now. And Curry only has 2 more years, and he's not going to sit around. So that's why I think everyone's pushing to go ahead and get someone who's 36 to come in here and play. It's not because. Oh, and one last thing. The owner is not going to sit up here and want to watch this anymore, and so he wants star power. So I guess what I'm saying is you either trade for a younger, if you want, I'm not arguing with you. He might not be the greatest answer at 36 or something, but you either trade for somebody who's younger, who has star power, who can draw people in here, or you. But the whole point is, once you have Curry and once you have Kerr, you married yourself to needing to build around Curry. And last thing, if you're going to go in a different direction, then the only suggestion I have is that you trade Curry.
Gotcha. Thanks, Kev. And I think that is the last point is the one that.
No, he's got another one.
Yeah, well, you might appreciate that, Kev. No, look, a lot to unpack there. I do agree with him though, from the standpoint of they have essentially married Curry and Kerr, right? They have 2 years left in their contracts, and to me, Dan, it is as much about Durant for me as it is. I just think the Warriors have to choose. They have to choose which timeline they are going to prioritize. There has been too much of this needle threading of trying to get Kuminga along, but not completely empowering him. That applies to Moody. That applies, I think, in the future to Podziemski and Trace Jackson-Davis. If these older players are still on this roster, there is not going to be enough room for these cats to grow largely enough to see what you have in them, I believe. You have to choose whether it's Curry, Draymond, and Clay, or whether it's your younger players. And I think the Warriors have told us that they are choosing still the big three, the championship core, because that's what's gotten them to this point. That's what's gotten them that Acropolis by the Bay. That is the three that they are going to emphasize, and then the younger guys can come along when they come along. That's another reason why I think Durant fits into this perfectly, because I believe the Warriors have already told us what direction they are trying to remain in, which is Curry's the guy. It's all about him. And what maximizes him the most, in my opinion, that is trading for someone like Kevin Durant.
I don't argue or I don't disagree that they still think that they can bring back this core. Although Klay Thompson, we're going to have to find out because it's going to come down to money. Like, Klay, are you willing to pay for X amount of dollars? If he is, love to have you back. And I think they have the leverage because I don't think Klay wants to leave the Bay Area. Here's the issue when it comes to Kevin Durant, again, is that you become an old basketball team, which is really sort of the issue with these guys. But to the caller's point, and to your point to a certain degree, don't get this twisted. I do recognize that they need another star, that they need someone to score the basketball. You cannot come back with Steph Curry and saying, oh, well, Podziemski's a year older, Trace Jackson-Davis now has some experience, and Moody and Kuminga can now take over the mantle and be that guy. I don't think that number 2 scorer and or potentially the lead scorer and having Steph Curry be 1A is on that current roster. Like, I agree with you that they got to go out and find that star. The area where we differ is that I do not think it's Kevin Durant. Like, I don't think it's a soon-to-be 36-year-old basketball player. That's the biggest mistake with this team. And again, when you just look at the landscape of the NBA, it's not by coincidence that it's the kids that have stormed the gate. It's all the 20-year-olds that are saying, old men, get out. Your day is done. It's about us. It's about, look at the New York Knicks. Jersey Ken's eyes are like saucers. I just glanced, I was like on the mound.
Something about the Knicks. What?
I was Mason Miller, and I looked over to the first base, just to keep the runner on.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was just giving me the big target. He was dialed in, looking at me the minute he heard Knicks.
Give me your A move.
So the Knicks, did you look at how many minutes these guys play?
Yeah.
Josh Hart plays every minute of every game. Same thing with Dante DiVincenzo and Brunson. Why can you do that? Because they're 27, 28, 29 years of age, respectively. That's where the league is at. And that's the way Thibodeau wants to play. And that's true for every team that's left standing. I'll reiterate this. The oldest star that's remaining in the NBA postseason is Kyrie Irving at age 32. And that's not by accident. This is not a young man's world we're living in when it comes to the postseason and the NBA.
Well, I also don't think the Knicks had Rick Celebrini on their staff. Otherwise, Josh Hart would not be playing every second of every single game. Tom Thibodeau's got to run him into the ground. I mean, good Lord. It does make me feel bad sometimes. And the guy's got, Mike and Ike's, eats Mike and Ike's, drinks a ton of caffeine, That I can subscribe to. But the man is hopped up on sugar for 48 minutes. That's how he plays so much.
But all of them are that way.
He doesn't feel it in his joints.
Tibbs is one of those guys. Tibbs reminds me of, like, this predates you, but like in the 1980s, they used to have these cop shows, and like every police commissioner or the guy that ran the precinct looked like Tibbs. Never smiled. Just like, what are you talking about? You know, like they were all like, that's who Tibbs is. I don't think I've seen Tibbs. He has one look, and it's that scowl.
When he smiles, though, it's like seeing a unicorn. Yeah.
Oh, we got to get out?
Yeah.
Oh,
we'll continue that on the other side. I'm telling you, I see you, Gene. I apologize. I see you, Robin, Sam, Bruno. We'll get your calls on the other side. 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings, Dan Devone with you on 95.7 The Game. What is the state of Golden State? What direction do you want to see them move in this summer? Dan wants to get younger. I think I'm willing to go out and give it one last run to take a big swing on someone like Kevin Durant if that's a player that they can acquire. Where do you fall? 888-957-9570. Saturdays with Giddings and Devone. Back after this on 95.7 The Game.
I'm what you might call very good at hide and seek. This one time, my parents had to round up the whole neighborhood to track me down. It was a mess. A lot of tears.
looked like a middle-aged dad, white guy. Like he has no chance against Muhammad Ali.
Looks like the guy that's going to all those suggestions and riding the cable car over there. He's going to walk in the Bay Bridge.
Exactly. Going
Gate.
to this list that was put together by one Bonte Hill and
For Ricky Pearsall's uncle.
Pearsall, and they're talking about going to Golden Gate Park and holding hands. Ricky Pearsall, come on, man. Do not listen to any one of those suggestions. We'll put together a list for you. It's going to be about 5 places, and they're all going to involve alcohol. Sorry. That's
they
how
got
shallow
to.
we are.
That's where I'm at.
So Chuck Wepner is, and it's still debatable. So he's this long shot. And if you watch Rocky 1, like it's Apollo Creed, right? And he's the big favorite. He's just given this 1,000,001 shot because it's, I believe it was shot in 1976.
Bayonne Bleeder.
Yeah, so it was shot in 1976. So it's thought to be, in the spirit of America, we're going to give this long shot an opportunity at the heavyweight championship. That was sort of Chuck.
That's right.
That's Chuck Wepner against Muhammad Ali. So I believe in the opening rounds, and it's still debatable, he knocks down Muhammad Ali and shocks the world. And Bayonne is going nuts. I'm like, are you kidding me? The Jersey kid just put Ali on the floor. And that's what happens in Rocky 1 with Apollo Creed the first time the two teams fight.
What's funny about it is that, he's very idolized. Like my mom lived on a street, shout out 33rd Street. Right off Broadway, there's a mural. It's not the greatest, but there's a mural of Chuck Wepner just.
Is that right?
Standing there.
That is
so
awesome.
You can go see that.
You got to take a picture of that.
Yeah, I'll definitely try to get someone to send that to you. But speaking of, do the Warriors have a puncher's chance going into next season with the same roster?
Well, from what I'm reading here, it seems like they have more of a puncher's chance than Charles Chuck Wepner because I'm reading here he fell 19 seconds into a 15-round fight against Ali. So I don't know if that's not making the playoffs. I don't know if that's getting swept like Kevin Durant was by the Timberwolves. But I think they got more than 19 seconds in a 15-round title fight, Dan.
Yeah, I think the Warriors are a long way away. I'm just going to reiterate this. I think Jonathan Kuminga's on the table. I think Jonathan gets traded. Kevin Durant's not coming here. I know it was good fodder for this past week when it comes to sports talk radio, and it's really not a matter of whether or not you and I think that he would be a good fit. I just don't think that Matt Ishbia is moving off of Kevin Durant. Okay. I think Ishbia actually believes. You talk about us doing a Warriors show and debating on whether or not to bring back the core. Matt Ishbia believes in Bradley Beal, who has a no-trade clause for the next 5 years, and Devin Booker, and he believes in Kevin Durant. Like, he believes that those guys are still the core, and they're a piece or two away, from, they re-signed Grayson Allen, so they feel as though that they just need, a point guard, essentially, is what Phoenix really needs. Now, he's delusional, I think, but that's where it sort of begins and ends with Kevin Durant as far as his availability.
Well, first of all, Bradley, I know the Warriors got a lot of bad contracts. Bradley Beal's worst contract in the NBA right now because he can't move.
I would agree with that.
But I do think if Ishbia is actually someone that prioritizes winning, it's interesting to me. He bought the team in 2022, so he missed the finals appearance that they had the year before. I think if he is smart enough to look around the NBA as well as his own team and talk to his general manager, James Jones, who was a former executive of the year that season, the Warriors being able to package multiple wings, specifically Wiggins and Kuminga, is the reason why I think the Suns would make that move. They were their most successful with not Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. Booker was a part of that. But it was with Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, and a long list of wings. So I think it's a mutually beneficial package if Kevin Durant wants to come play for the Golden State Warriors, because the Warriors are in need, I think, if they want to get better and if they want to maximize the 2-year window that is left of Steph Curry's max contract, they need to get a better number 2 or even perhaps a number 1 offensive option into the building. That's Kevin Durant. That's why I'd go after him, is because he automatically resets the hierarchy of your starting 5, which in my opinion was the most inconsistent part of the Warriors last season. Meanwhile, if you're the Suns, you've already seen that Booker and Beal and Durant get to a first-round sweep. You can't move Beal. I don't think they want to move Devin Booker, and he's talked about the fact he's a big Kobe fan. He wants to be a lifer, one place, one spot. I don't think he's going anywhere. So naturally, the guy on the outside looking in is Kevin Durant. I think that's their most tradable asset right now. And I think to get multiple wings back, in addition to first-round picks that they already don't have, would be a mutually beneficial choice for both the Suns and the Warriors.
If Kevin Durant were to come to the Golden State Warriors, I'm trying to think, and maybe someone can help me out, of any team in any sport that was comprised of players in their mid-30s that won anything. And again, this just gets back
Steph
to
Curry?
youth. No, I mean as a team.
Oh.
I'm trying to think of a team that was comprised primarily of mid-30-something-year-old players and that were actually good.
Yeah.
Certainly, it's not applicable to the current NBA and the state of affairs. So, again, all I say is just watch what's unfolding in the NBA as far as the playoffs in both conferences. And there's a reason why all the old fellas are sitting at home or in Cancun or watching these things on television because it's a young man's world. And you could be the old guy, but you better be the only old guy. Like, we could have Steph Curry, but even Steph Curry is sort of a lesser version thereof. But you better surround him with some good younger basketball players, and maybe you have a shot. The idea of bringing back old basketball players and then adding another old player, just philosophically, in a theoretical sense, is just asinine.
I can see the logic there, but I also want to bring in Gene in Oakland because he's been hanging on patiently, sees it both ways, which I think is where a lot of people are at. It's, are you leaning one way or the other? The Warriors are kind of telling us they're trying to thread a needle. Gene, how are you reading the situation? You're on 95.7 The Game with Devone and Giddings. How are you?
I'm fine. I've kind of gone back and forth on this for, a couple of years now.
Same.
Right now, I think both of you guys are right in your own ways, but I'm leaning more your way, Evan, because I look at the two options. The one of, trying to get a star, and I would like to go after Kevin, even though he's not quite the Kevin he was when we had him in 2017, but, or I should say 17, right? Was it 18 when he
17
when he had the injury? Anyway,
19, yeah,
17. Okay, so you know what I mean. So, but he's still a great player. The other option of, first of all, you're not going to get any young superstar to come here. We don't have the assets for that. I don't see any way possible that you're going to. First of all, you're not going to lure a free agent, young, budding superstar here to play with a bunch of old guys. And nobody's going to trade that way. So I think you really do need the star. You need the star to energize the base. You need the star to satisfy Curry that we're trying still. You need the star to get Lacob to overpay again because he's not going to. He's made it clear he's not going to pay $400 million and have another version of this or maybe even worse than this. Out on the court next year, so that if you don't do this, let's say you run the same team or something like it back, I'm afraid you're going to lose. You're going to lose Curry after next year. If not during next year. So I mean, for the sake of the brand, for the sake of the excitement of the fans, for the sake of giving us, maybe some kind of a ghost of a chance. And frankly, I'm one of those people that doesn't believe we really are going to win another one. But at least, once again, if you get add enough excitement to energize the base and give them something to hope for that reason alone, I think you should go after someone like Kevin.
Thanks, Gene. This is from the 206 on the Xfinity Mobile text line, Dan. You're trying
to Seattle.
You're trying to tell me Steph, Clay, and KD is better than Book, Beal, and KD? It ain't enough. I beg to differ. I think Steph, Draymond, Clay, and Durant is better than Booker, Beal, and KD. That's just me.
Well, Beal just wasn't very good. But I would disagree. Ev, this idea that we're still hanging on to these guys as if it's 2017 is really, I mean, I miss that. It's preposterous. This is crazy talk here. The one thing that we know, and I don't mean to reiterate the obvious, but Father Time is undefeated for a reason. When these guys got together 7 years ago in the Hamptons and everybody was in their late 20s and life was in front of them, go get your championships. To try and do this 7 years later with players that are still good, not great, but good, and think that you can rinse something out of these guys to get back into that pantheon of great teams winning NBA championships, it has come and gone. These are now more relegated, I think, to role players. And quite frankly, I don't see a future with Klay Thompson unless he's willing to come in at a very team-friendly deal. And even at that, you are going to be coming off my bench. And same with Steph and Draymond. Your minutes are going to be reduced because I've got to get in and work in Trace Jackson-Davis as well as Moody and Kuminga. And then if you're talking about Kevin Durant with this team, well, then Moody and Kuminga are no longer an option because they're traded. And Trace Jackson-Davis may not be with this team as well. And I've got no future because I just traded my draft picks. While he might be the short-term answer, and yes, he's going to give you some points, and it's not all on Steph, while all that might be true and have credibility, that doesn't mean you're winning a championship or you're even better than a 6 seed at best. So I think we just have to be real here. And again, it's just to me very obvious that you're an old basketball team, and I don't mean to keep saying the same thing, and Kevin Durant doesn't make you any younger.
No, he doesn't. But I also don't see the Warriors pulling the plug on this thing for at least a couple more seasons. I don't think they can. Unless you're telling me that Klay Thompson's not going to be on the team next year, and that might be a move that sets up something else and you try and get off of one of your albatrosses. I don't think Draymond Green is tradable right now. I think Andrew Wiggins is more tradable just because you'd be willing to take a hit, but that doesn't make you any better. I'm wondering, Dan, what is going on in the Warriors front office and what direction they want to go with this thing. They have made this bed that they're now laying in, which has seen them miss the playoffs 3 of the last 5 years. And I think that's something that Joe Lacob does not want to continue. Whether you think Kevin Durant moves you that much, I think he gets you to the playoffs, and that's a place you got to get before you can win a championship. Now, Robin in San Francisco wants to bring up a question that I think is probably the crux of the issue here with KD is, does he want to come back? Robin, how you doing? You're on with Evan and Dan.
Hi, guys. I'm doing fine. So I'm going to repeat what I had to say earlier in the week about KD. Why would KD want to come back here? I wouldn't want to come back here. To a fan base who did not appreciate it. I don't want to hear that they did because most of them are backpedaling. Because oftentimes KD was the best player on the floor, even with Curry on the floor. At times they play good basketball together, but that's the truth. KD oftentimes was the best player on the floor. Oftentimes he put the Warriors on his back to win a game with Curry on the floor. But the fan base pushed back on that because nobody can be better than the beloved Steph Curry. And I love Steph Curry, but I'm a basketball fan first, you did? So they did not appreciate him. Now they're backpedaling. We want Kevin Durant because of this and that. That's crap. They did not appreciate him. They were saying he played too much ISO ball, that he when he broke his Achilles or tore his Achilles, fans all night called on this station, and I heard also in the arena from a media person who on the air who said they were saying, "Oh wow, that was a great game. Now we're finally playing. I'm sorry for Kevin, we're playing Warrior basketball. So why would he come back here?" Then the issue of Draymond Green, Day. What I don't like about Kevin Durant, he sit up on his podcast and they were lying through the organization under the bus. Day didn't like it because when it affects his money, he pulls shady moves. I'm just telling you, KD don't want to come back here. Why would anybody come back to a fan base that didn't appreciate him?
Hey, Robin.
Peace out, guys. Robin,
sorry, but before you go, I did want to ask. Oh, I guess she's off. I was going to ask her if her dog also felt the same way. It sounds like a big dog back there.
Robin always has the best background noise. Either the blinker's going 100 miles an hour, or she's in the car, there's a dog. I mean, it's never just Robin.
I don't know if she was at the pound or if she was on the Autobahn the last time we talked to her, but she is always making moves.
She's got a good point. I think that, but I would also say, hey, Robin, you all right over there?
Watch out. Sorry.
The one thing I would say is, Robin, we just don't know what's in a man's head.
About to throw that at you.
Well, it makes sense that, he wouldn't come back here, and everything you said is right on. I'm not going to dispute that. But you can't crawl into a man's head. I have no idea. He may just say, yeah, I want to go back there. Or I never had an issue with Steph, and we got some unfinished business, and Steve Kerr and I were cool. You never know. You just have no idea what's ruminating in between a dude's ears. And so while everything you laid out makes sense, again, to me, this is a moot point because I don't think Matt Ishbia is going to move Kevin Durant. He's not trading Durant. I still think he believes in his core of Beal, Durant, and Booker.
The reason why KD would want to come back to the Bay, it doesn't have to do with the fans. It doesn't have to do with it has to do with playing competitive basketball. And while there are other teams that are in better positions, well, 20 of them, the 16 of which at least they made the playoffs, there are other teams better positioned to win a championship. I'm not sure how many teams, if Kevin Durant wants to leave Phoenix, he can feasibly get himself to. So if we're just going down the list of teams that could acquire a Kevin Durant, Philadelphia might be one. Are they really in a better position than Golden State?
New York, believe it or not.
The New York Knicks, perhaps. I don't know if I'm the Knicks, so I want KD.
Don't want him.
There's New Jersey Ken. Doesn't want him. If you're a top 4 seed in your respective conference, why would you try and trade for Kevin Durant? So I don't think that there's a contender out there that he could get himself to. That means that you're looking at the lay of the land. I think Phoenix, and we've seen him, he spent 2 years in Brooklyn, then he asked for a trade. I don't know if he necessarily believes in Frank Vogel. I think that front office has not necessarily done him any favors, though they've been aggressive. They haven't made smart moves. He's looking at that roster and saying that's going to be the same roster as next year. And that roster, either I'm going to have to carry to drag, which he already played 75 games, played 38 minutes a night for, and it got them to a first-round sweep in the postseason. Granted, that's further than the Warriors. But Kevin Durant might also be looking at Golden State and saying, I know I've played with them before. Yes, it was 5 years ago, but I understand that system. I'm going to be playing in the Olympics with Steve Kerr and Stephen Curry this summer. Maybe there's something we can figure out. I'll let bygones be bygones with Draymond Green, and that might be the best place that I can get to. And there's an increasing, this is also a Warriors issue, but there's an increasing urgency for these older players to maximize what's left of their careers. So does Kevin Durant want to waste another season in Phoenix, or does he look at the Warriors and say, well, they're not a championship team. If I go there, we might not win at all, but that's going to give me a great shot to go out and try and give it 1 or 2 last great years that are left in the tail end of his prime. Also, I just think there's a natural inflection point, Dan, with these contracts that the Warriors have set themselves up for. While they might have to mortgage some of the younger players and future assets, in 2 years, Curry's a free agent. Durant's a free agent. Kerr's contract is up. Draymond would have 1 more year left. Klay Thompson, I think he can bring back on a 2-year deal. You might have to set things up and say, we got 2 more years left of this thing, and then we'll completely tear it down to the seams and go from there. I just wonder how much this summer leaning into or empowering younger players and trying to bring more of them in. I'm not sure there's many out there for them to go get. I just believe, Dan, that there is a reset button that they don't necessarily have to press right now, but it feels like that's what you want them to do.
Well, I think the reset button now is much more advantageous as opposed to, say, 2 years from now with the Kevin Durant. Because if you're hitting reset...
Like you want to get out ahead of it.
Well, exactly. If you hit reset with Kevin Durant 2 years from now and Steph Curry and Steve Kerr and Draymond Green, all their contracts are up, and I don't think you're winning squat with Kevin Durant. And if you're hitting reset at that point, well, the cupboard's bared, baby. You're going back to the Golden State Warriors who never went to the postseason, and you're in the lottery every year for the next decade. That's what you're going to that's the recipe for what it is that you're looking at. If you want Kevin Durant and you want to trade draft picks and you want to move off of Kuminga and you want to give up a Trace Jackson-Davis and a Podziemski, 2 years from now when that doesn't work and you're hitting reset, you got nothing to reset. You're looking at the lottery for the next 10 to 15 years. And so the idea of trying to be relevant and good, I think, is leaning into the kids, finding somebody, and I know this is so easier said than done, but getting a young player that can be an impactful guy that's going to give you points every night to go along with Steph Curry so that you have an opportunity of making a run in the postseason, yet you're still considered a young team. But the idea of leaning in on Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and now Kevin Durant, and then hitting reset 2 years after that doesn't work, that to me would be a disaster waiting to happen.
I think there might be disaster on either front. And I think that's the reality the Warriors could be looking at.
You know, when you talk about Kevin Durant and you mentioned his idea to go to Brooklyn, well, you pointed out how Bradley Beal's got the worst contract in the NBA.
Yes.
The worst decision, maybe in the history of the league, is when he said, I'm Kevin Durant. You know what I think would be a good idea is to, first of all, leave the Golden State Warriors and hitch my wagon to this lunatic named Kyrie Irving. Now Kyrie Irving is well behaved and drawn between them.
He's the oldest superstar left in the playoffs.
Well, he's actually finally, behaving in Dallas. But back then, when he was in Planet Kyrie, right, and he was in this Aaron Rodgers planet of, conspiracy theories, and he couldn't play in home games because he wouldn't get the vaccination. Like, for him to think that I want to hitch my wagon to Kyrie Irving, that's a good idea. We don't want to go to the Knicks. Even though the Knicks wanted you, I think we should go play in Brooklyn. Jersey Ken, where the hell are you? If you know anything about the New York area, the Clippers,
outside talk.
The Clippers in LA is not even a good analogy in terms of how the Clippers play, in the backyard of the Lakers. The Brooklyn Nets are so irrelevant. Like, the idea of anybody wanting to play there is beyond me.
Well, maybe on the next side for the final hour, we can get into the least desirable locations, but also just this idea of toxic superstars. If that's something you want back in the Bay, I don't look at Kevin Durant as toxic. I look at him as an offensive upgrade. I look at him as a way for the Warriors to close the gap that Steph Curry was talking about, or reveal that number on the other side. I see Austin and San Jose. We'll kick it off with you in the next segment. 888-957-9570 is the number. This is Saturdays with Evan Giddings and Dan Devone. Back after this, 95.7 The Game.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even have type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance.
Now back to 95.7 The Game.
All right, 2 hours in, 1 hour left. Evan Giddings, Dan Devone here on Saturdays, keeping it rolling all summer long with our guy, New Jersey Ken. We're talking about
Jersey Ken, no new.
New Jersey?
Just Jersey.
Just Jersey?
Jersey Ken.
Do you guys say New Jersey Ken?
It depends. Yeah. When people ask me where you're from, I'm like, oh, Jersey. I don't say new.
The Garden State?
Jersey Ken. He's a left coaster, man.
Well, this is funny. It's because Dan's more of a city guy than I am. And I swear to God, every time we hop on this air, this man brings more East Coast references than anybody I've ever met.
Hey, you got to be on board with the Knicks. Did I text you during the next Philly game?
Well, you texted me during multiple Knicks Philly games. So.
But I'm just telling you, that series was just a throwback, man. Like Philly, New York, just a shout out. We got people actually watching us. I feel like I'm in a fishbowl here.
Oh, fantastic. Wait, by the way, are you guys looking forward to, as an East Coaster from Ken, as an adopted East Coaster, basically an associate of the East Coast and Dan Devone, are you guys looking forward to the Indiana Knicks series? Because that is a throwback, right?
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the
Reggie Miller. Yeah.
Sure.
Was it, I want to say, 11 points in 9 seconds?
8.
8 points in 9 seconds.
Well, it's basically what happened.
But I mean, it's still pretty impressive.
Well, it's pretty much what happened in the first round.
I'm going to say 11 points.
When Josh Hart assaulted Tyrese Maxey on the baseline multiple times.
I mean, you're talking about Mitch. He did walk, right? But
who, Maxey?
Yeah, that's what they on that 2-minute report.
Didn't give him a timeout.
Whatever. But the most important part of that whole
swung the series.
Both stories though is that in each of those series with the Pacers and Reggie Miller and Maxey and the Sixers, Knicks won the next game.
Oh yeah, why did I come up with 11? 8 points in 9 seconds.
Still very impressive though, Dan.
Wow. Yeah, that was getting back to I think that the Indiana, with that's so long ago. I find just because of
highlights.
The proximity of Philly and New York, and if you know anything about those two worlds,
shout out I-95.
Yeah. Which, by the way, just completely unrelated, there was a tanker that blew up on that thing last week. It was just like they shut it down, which caused crazy traffic. Anyways,
was it a large lane highway or a short one?
WFAN, which is part of the Odyssey family. Let's go out to John, who's standing by in line 2 in Staten Island.
Now let's get back on track with our own guy. Austin in San Jose has been hanging along.
Austin, where the hell have you been?
Yeah,
man?
Austin, we're looking forward to it. This is the third hour, man.
Bro.
What's been going on?
You sleeping in again?
We went out late last night.
Put down the tequila, brother.
I forgot about you guys. Happy Saturday, brothers. Listen, I'm loving the East Coast talk. I'm an East Coast guy. Love the Knicks Villanova connection. I went to Penn, so Big Five basketball.
Nova
I
Knicks.
That. But we got to go with those Villanova boys. There's a reason why they look good on the court because they like it being a musical group, man. They know where everybody is and they can just turn it on and off. So it's fun to watch the Knicks. Listen, the Dubs, man, they've already reset. You guys keep saying reset. The league has reset the Warriors. They don't have a choice now, Evan. They have to do something different. I mean, the notion they can just bring in KD and that's going to fix it, I'm with Dan. That's not going to get it done. And if all they were going to do is just bring in KD and re-sign Clay, you and I could, in a day could sit down and do that. They bought in Dunleavy to be more creative. Dunleavy's got to rebuild the roster. That's going to be a lot. You talk about challenging. He's gonna have to do it. And he basically said already, if you read his comments, he said we're not good enough. He said we weren't good enough. So he's not hiding behind, hey, there's a quick fix here. He's letting you know there's a lot of work to be done. So the only question is how much time is it going to take to do it and what the effect's going to be? Because it is going to be rebuilt. I think that's going to happen. Whether we like it or not. The last thing I wanted to say was, Dan, I think we always talk about, I always am curious about Joe Lacob and his finances and how he manages the entertainment part of the whole equation. Because as much as we talk about the basketball, I would say 60% of what the Warriors are, unfortunately, is entertainment now. And the question becomes is, what's the effect of not having Thompson with Curry on the roster? What's the effect on the attendance, both here and when they're on the road, and how does that affect the brand? I think that's much more fascinating to me. I'll just listen, guys.
Thanks, Austin. I mean, I don't know. Like the brand right now to me is stale. I mean, that's the brand of the Warriors. It's stale, and it's been stale for about 2 years. I think whatever they do, Dan, it's got to be big. And it's got to be big more for the entertainment purposes that Austin's talking about, in my opinion, sometimes even more than basketball, because I don't think there's a move out there that gets them a championship, that makes you look at the Warriors and say that is a title contending team. Whether it's moving backward, well, not moving backwards, but moving younger, to your point, or to my point, which is going out and trying to court a Kevin Durant. And maybe some people would prefer LeBron. I don't know if Paul George is somebody that's now available as well. I don't know, whatever name you want. But that's the direction I feel like the next 2 years, the Warriors almost in a way are signaling to us that they're moving. I think the point about Dunleavy is interesting. He was brought in to shake things up and be creative. I didn't think last season was all that creative. He paid Draymond Green $4 million, or 4 years for $100 million. He traded for a 38-year-old point guard.
That wasn't creative, but it was
financially creative because now you can get off that contract.
Yeah, but it was creative in a sense. It was creative in that it was almost so obvious that nobody really realized just how good he would fit in with the Warriors.
Who, Paul?
I mean, Chris Paul. And I think you got to give it to him. He was creative with his draft picks. I get what you're saying. He wasn't, he sort of, did the obvious, but there was a level of, like, I entrust him of sort of getting outside of the box more so than I would Myers.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bob's best ability was his ability to manage relationships, to keep the egos in check, which now are not as competitive or as good as they used to be. But I think Dunleavy is someone, like, he doesn't have a first-round pick this year, or they got a 3.7% chance of getting a top 4 pick this season. I don't think he's going to get that.
They are picking in the second round, number 55. Bronny James, come on down.
Bronny James coming down. Yeah, we want to get younger, so let's go get Bronny. No, so go spend a year at Elon, or transfer out to the University of New Hampshire. Rhode Island needs some shooters. Go find yourself in the mid-major, Bronny.
Shout out Lamar Odom.
Do what's best for you. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good pull. But Dan, to me, I think the Durant move, assuming that that's something that he greenlights, I just think it's the most obvious choice for the Warriors.
Austin brought up an interesting point. Here's your name drop. What is my third of the day? But I had another interview. Actually, it wasn't an interview. It was just a conversation I had with Mark Cuban. And I said, you've got to win, right, in order to put butts in the seat. Winning, it all just comes down to winning, right? Mm-hmm. You got to win in order for people to go out and see your product. And he adamantly disagreed. He was much younger at the time. And he said, no, it's entertainment. This is the entertainment industry, and a lot of owners miss that. He's like, you got to create entertainment for people when they come to the stadium, the arena. They've got to be entertained by things that they see or do. You just have to make it fan-friendly. Like, the experience is where you have to lean in on. And yes, you want to win. You always want to win. That's the bottom line. But there's too much focus on winning. And getting to Austin's point that a lot of this is just entertainment. Though I would push back if you get Kevin Durant,
that's
with or without Clay down. Yeah, that's must-see TV. Even if Clay's playing in Orlando, everybody's watching the Golden State Warriors next year. And it's the reason why Steph Curry makes, 53 mil, 55 mil, and that's not nearly enough for a guy who, what he means in terms of that sort of intangible dollar and the merch that he supplies and the PR and all the butts he puts in the seats just simply by traveling to wherever people... They plan their entire basketball season on the one time, if I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, when is Steph Curry coming to town? That's the only game I'm going to. And that's applicable to a lot of cities. So the entertainment part of it is very, very, very real when it comes to the Golden State Warriors. They're the closest thing to the Chicago Bulls back in the day. They're Rolling Stones-esque, They get off the bus, there's people waiting for them.
Not as much anymore.
No, that's true.
And I think that's part of the issue. I think the Warriors have understood due to the last 2 seasons that they're no longer championship worthy. They're trying to get back there, but they're not going to enter next season. At least I don't expect next season to be one where people are pumping out their chest and saying, we're going to win a title. This is a team that's going to contend. And maybe they'll say those things because that's publicly what you do. But I don't think internally they look at themselves like a team that is a dynasty or a part of a dynasty. I don't think they're even looking at that team like they did in 2021 to 22, saying we got some good pieces, we're getting Clay back, we're getting healthy, we got an emerging Wiggins. There were reasons to believe that that team could do something special. Winning a championship, I don't know if anyone believed, but there was evidence that they could make a run. I don't know if internally they're looking at themselves anymore like they're a top 4 seed in this Western Conference, but what they have to do, Dan, and it might sound cheap or not for non-basketball purposes, but they have to find a way to become entertaining again, to find a reason for you to watch them on a given night, to follow what's going on, to become, I think the worst place that they were this year was when they were the 12 seed and they were becoming almost irrelevant. And the conversations that you and I were circling around on Warriors this week, well, are they the team that's, on this side of 500, on that side of 500? Who are they? What's going to happen? Do they have it in them? All those conversations, to me, are irrelevant if your team does not have any sort of star-studded attachment to it. And those stars that they have right now, Dan, that have won 4 championships are fading. And I think that they need to bring in another star, at the very least, to become a show, to become something that people want to learn about, to want to read about, to want to watch. The place they cannot be next year is out of the news cycle completely. If you have Steph Curry on your team, you have a all-star game that you are hosting in San Francisco next season, you cannot afford to be a non-sequitur, a non-show. And that's, to me, where they've fallen to at this point. And that's, in a way, what I feel like they need to address this summer.
Well, they'll be relevant because I think even if they fall on their face and they're not good, people will certainly talk about it. And as long as Klay Thompson, Steph, and Draymond are on that team, people, even though they are old and not nearly as effective and a mere shell of their old selves, I think that they still will draw at the gate. It just becomes a matter of whether this team wins or not. I think the idea, it worked with Kevin Durant, but as we have seen, that teams that win in the NBA, and pick your team. I know Brunson put New York over the top, but for the most part, this all happens organically. You look at Denver, you look at OKC, and you look at Minnesota, and it's essentially their core is comprised of players that they drafted, that came through their system, that their fan bases grew up with, whether it's Anthony Edwards, whether it's Chet Holmgren, whether it's you pick a team, and essentially it is from those homegrown pieces that they've been able to cultivate over the years. That's usually the winning recipe. So although how that's applicable to the Golden State Warriors right now, I'm not exactly sure, but this idea that we got to go out and purchase a star and purchase ourselves another winner has rarely worked, not only for the Warriors, but although they did get Kevin Durant, but you could argue that, the structure was already in place, that they were just that one player away. But right now, I think that it's got to come through the draft. It's got to come through some of the kids, and then you have to add pieces. But there's got to be that foundation, right? There has to be some sort of a base where you can say, okay, we have this youth movement that's getting better as they get older, and then we're going to add some younger pieces. But the idea of just trying to get Kevin Durant, give up the draft picks, trade the kids, it doesn't work with Kevin Durant. In 2 years, you're pushing reset with absolutely nothing. I mean, you're left with a completely bare cupboard, and you're in that lottery, and you become one of those teams. You become Portland. You become Charlotte. You become the Utah Jazz, a team that only, just reminisces about the glory days of the Big Three, because you're going to be in that lottery and you're going to be on the outside looking in for years. That's the recipe. That's what you have to avoid. And there's a fork in the road where you could go ahead and get Kevin Durant and mortgage that future, but that's what you're looking at if it doesn't work. And in my estimation, you are destined for that to be your future if you decide to go that route.
Juniors at Pacifica, 888-957-9570 is the number. Saturdays with Evan Giddings and Dan Devone on 95.7 The Game. Yes, I know I mispronounced a word, misused a word 415. Thank you for grabbing the dictionary for us. Meanwhile, Junior, what's going on, my man? How are you?
Well, I'm actually kind of annoyed and frustrated, and I know why. It's just because the Warriors are not playing basketball and have not been for a while, and that just really tortures me. I hate it. It's one of the the worst things. I'm trying not to curse and get flushed here. So it's bad. So how do we avoid this? But more important, like, let's not settle for mediocrity. This is the Warriors. To really win these days, I mean, win big scale, you either have to have a super duper star, there's a few of those, and build your team around them, and that person's style becomes your theory of the case, or you need to find a market inefficiency like the Warriors did with threes, right? Or the 49ers with the West Coast offense, to go to a different sport. So to me, if you bring in KD now and you get rid of your youngsters, none of those youngsters, I love Jonathan Kuminga, but none of those youngsters is turning out to be a super duper star in the making, right? So not someone you can build a team around. So bring in KD, make us interesting and relevant. We aren't relevant just by watching the older guys decline, unless we had another one, and it's actually then more interesting. There's some dynamics there. And figure out how you're going to be different 3 and 4 and 5 years down the road. Do you build a scouting operation in Africa, that's been underused? Do you find something? Do you go back to the pick and roll and never shoot another three-pointer to save your life? What are you going to do that's different? I think Dunleavy's a smart guy. I don't know if he's a deep innovator, but some people around there could be. And I think he can carry out a big, different approach and strategy, given a little time and focus. So I say bring in KD to play out Steph's remaining basketball years in good form and in an interesting, intriguing way. Kind of, we owe that to Steph, and then figure out, what's the next revolution after the current group and the three-pointer.
It's interesting. I mean, I agree. Yeah, I think you got to find a way to change up some stuff. And I know that Kevin Durant signals just kind of diving into the past, but I mean, I also think it signals a different place than where they've been the last 2 years. I think also, so the whole idea of trying to kind of recreate things, or I don't know, remake the wheel, all that stuff, to your point, Dan, it tends to happen organically. Like the Warriors changed basketball. I don't think they were intending to change the game by saying we're just going to be the best three-point shooting team ever. They so happened to get two players that were arguably the two best shooters of all time, Steph and Clay. And then you kind of figure out what fits with them. So I don't think the Warriors are looking at the rest of the league and saying, how do we become different than them? If anything, they might be more trying to assimilate than trying to, I don't know, find something that isn't there. I'm saying, I heard Steve Kerr say, we need to get bigger. We need to get more athletic.
Well, they certainly have to get bigger.
That's what the rest of the league is. I mean, yeah. Minnesota and Denver tips off at 4 o'clock.
Everybody is.
They got 2 7-footers in Minnesota. They got Jokic. They got size all around the wing on the Nuggets side.
Everybody does, except the Warriors. Everybody. Give me another team that plays with Kevon Looney as your tallest player, or Draymond Green more often than not. It's the Warriors. And again, it just gets back to Steve Kerr and the Golden State Warriors hanging on to 2018. It's like that guy, who's pushing 40 and he's still wearing clothes from the 1990s, or he's that old dude who's still hanging out at the club. It's like, dude, time to move on. It's like, find a different way. It's like this idea that you can still play basketball like it's 2018 for a bunch of old men and rely on ball movement and transition when you're the worst team statistically from a transitional standpoint. But the Golden State Warriors have just got to do this, a different way. And you need a big, man, because the reason why it worked with the Warriors, and I know they rebounded the basketball well last year, and people will point at that saying, no, the big's overrated. Look how many rebounds we got, and we were good amongst the best teams rebounding. Well, when you shoot that many threes, you get the long rebound, and you had matchup problems every single game, and it requires so much energy. Draymond can do it. He can body up with bigs, but it requires so much energy, again, for a guy who's 35, as opposed to just sticking a 7-footer out there that's serviceable. Hardenstein, again, getting back to the New York Knicks, even Mitchell Robinson, these guys aren't going to be confused with Wilt Chamberlain or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar anytime soon. But what they do is they'll give you minutes against Joel Embiid. They'll give you all 10 of their fouls and combined give you 35 minutes when you're D'ing up against Jokic. The Warriors don't have that. And this idea that you can play small and it's still 2018 and we're doing it our way is really archaic and it's not forward thinking. For a guy like Steve Kerr, who I give a lot of credit to, who's oftentimes more innovative than this.
So what about Trace Jackson Davis? He's not your center of the future?
I like Trace Jackson Davis, but you still need to, and Trace Jackson Davis is a good start, but Trace Jackson Davis and P.J. Washington and Gafford, now you have something. There's got to be something more than Trace Jackson Davis as being the end-all in terms of our big. That's the problem. It's like, we got Kevon Looney, we're good. No. I mean, seriously, look at the landscape of the NBA. I would argue everybody's got at least one 7-footer that sees time. Everybody.
That sees time, but I don't know how many of them actually help. I mean, there's a lot of pretty mediocre big men. You're right. Hartenstein is good for what the Knicks do. Do I think he could do the same thing with the Warriors? I'm not so sure. I mean, they play a frenetic up and down style of basketball that is beneficial to him, but they also have another guy, Mitchell Robinson, who's a high effort player. So that fits for them. I mean, the only two centers in the league that really are difference makers are Jokic and Embiid, and Embiid's not on the floor half the time. So,
agreed. But if Joel Embiid's coming to town,
I go Bear.
You need somebody who's going to you can't just simply have your way. If a center is coming to town against the Golden State Warriors or a team that's big, you're just cooked. You know that because you're just you have no way to combat that. And I would argue and push back that every team in the NBA recognizes, while sometimes, depending on lineups, you can get exposed because Hartenstein can't get out and extend. But if Embiid's in the game, I got somebody who can stay in front of him. I got somebody who can put a body on him and get rebounds. This idea of the Golden State Warriors, just when these big, talented centers come to town, can have their way because they're 1.5 feet taller over your biggest man is just ludicrous. And Steve Kerr's finally coming to that realization. It doesn't have to be a star center. It doesn't have to be one of the better centers in the NBA. It just has to be somebody that's serviceable. And to go along with Trace Jackson Davis, that you now have at least somebody that's coming off the bench and a front line, again, that doesn't max out at 6'6", 6'7".
I think there's a bigger issue that they need to address, and I'll reveal that on the other side. Size is certainly there, but I think there's something else.
By the way, my Mark Cuban story, or should I hang on to that on the other side?
Other side. I want to give you a full 10 minutes to flesh out your conversation, your exclusive one-on-one with one of the most important NBA figures in the league. Mark Cuban sat down with Dan Devone some time ago. We'll get into that on the other side. 888-957.
Exclusive interview.
888-957-9570 is the number. Saturdays with Evan Giddings and Dan Devone rolls on. One last segment coming up your way on the other side on 95.7 The Game.
I'm what you might call very good at hide and seek. This one time, my parents had to round up the whole neighborhood to track me down. It was a mess. A lot of tears. Well, now that we got Xfinity, we have Wi-Fi all.
Oh, really?
I think that they need to bring in another star, at the very least, to become a show. Place they cannot be next year is out of the news cycle completely.
Now back to 95.7 The Game.
I like this.
Yeah, this is, San Francisco Knights? People under the stairs? Dude, they performed at my college. I think it was my junior year. I had no clue who they were. There was like, yeah, we got for shout out Woolapalooza. It might be coming up.
Such an East Coast vibe in my mind. That's why I love this song.
Are they from LA though?
Are they? Oh yeah,
I'm pretty sure they're West Coasters. I could be wrong.
No, they definitely are. This is like an East Coast like hip hop beat to me. But if you haven't been paying attention, people out there, I've been playing all kinds of New York hip hop.
Yeah, you and your boy Justin outside, who's got a Yankees cap on. That guy also does. He DJs all around the city, but he also is on. Is it 102 Jams? Chewy Gomez's station from 5 to 6 on Fridays. And so I was tuning in last week, and all I heard were East Coast songs. I was like, what are you taking over West Coast station for? Just playing East Coast rap.
Bring the beats, baby. Bring the beats.
I do love East Coast rap. New York is the king of hip hop.
Well, there used to be the wars back in the day.
Wow.
Literal wars. It was pretty ugly.
But, okay, before we wrap up with the Warriors show, now we got till noon. 888-957-9570 is the number. Saturdays, Evan Giddings, Dan Devone with you. If you got any questions, topics, concerns, we're talking about what the Warriors are, the state of Golden State right now. But I do wish we could take people behind the scenes to what you talk about during the breaks, because it has nothing to do with sports. So we were discussing, what was this, like the most cordial people possible. And you brought up, well, I think in Europeans in general, but this tale of a Frenchman named Oliver, which is just perfect, taking you on a train ride without any expectation of payment or you reciprocating the gesture. This dude was just kind.
Yeah, he just provided me with the directions. He was able to, I didn't speak French fluently. And so this guy just took me all the way to my hotel. And so I figured, oh, well, he wants money. Why would anybody do this? And he said, no. He said, and I said, can I get your name? And he said, my name is Oliver. And that's the last I saw him as he walked down the cobblestone streets of Paris. And I'm like, wow, I'm going to rethink, because I think I have, much like a lot of people in these parts, these perception of the Parisians and the people from France. And I was like, no, these are some of the nicest people in the world. And they were, I was there, last summer, and they were throughout my entire stay. You stop people and you're just like, can you help me? The most disarming, so what I tried to do was I crammed French. And I'm like, okay, I got to learn the language so I can get along. As I found out, for those of you that are headed to France or going to Paris, maybe for the Olympics, the most disarming, the only thing you need to know is bonjour. If you just walk in and say bonjour, go to a restaurant, you want a baguette, you go wherever, just a simple bonjour, and it's just letting them know that you have the respect of the language, and it's sort of like it just lets their guard down, that you're making an attempt. There's something about just simply those two words, bonjour. Can I give you a Mark Cuban story?
Oh yeah, of course.
So after
France.
Yeah, no. This is after my interview with Cuban.
Oh, right? Yes, of course. You're exclusive. That's right.
So Cuban and I had this conversation. And so I wasn't living in San Francisco, but I happened to be in San Francisco literally like 3 days after that interview. And so who do I run into? And this is when this was pre-Shark Tank Mark Cuban. He was big and was obviously, everybody knew who he was, but he wasn't to the point where he is right now. So I see him at the Balboa Cafe, and I'm only in town for 2 days, and I go to the Balboa Cafe.
Shout out Gavin Newsom.
And my buddies had taken off a little bit sooner, so I'm like, man, all right, I still feel like I got one in me. I see Mark Cuban, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing here? And people weren't clamoring around him. He was just walking around, and he was holding a bottle of Cristal champagne. So he buys me a bottle of Cristal champagne. And then we went around, which is known the Triangle. There's these 3 bars down on Fillmore Street. And we went there was a lounge across the street. And he would buy me these bottles of champagne as though we were drinking like Coors Light. Like we were drinking these bottles as if they were just regular beers. And I'm holding this Magnum in my hand. And I'm like, this is how you live? This is when he wasn't single at the time, but when he was out and about and doing these sort of things.
So you just approached him and said, hey, Mark, I'm a big fan. Or,
we just had this interview.
Oh,
so he
I
knew.
see.
So I had just done this interview. So like literally 3 days later, because the Warriors were playing the Dallas Mavericks.
You just spotted him.
And I just saw him at the Balboa Cafe, and I'm like, hey. And he's like, hey, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And he's like, yeah, I'm out, man. And I'm like, all right, my boys went home. What are we doing? Next thing I know,
buying Cristal.
I got a Magnum in my hand, and he just drank them like it was a beer. Which I'm like, okay, this is how owners roll. I can do this.
That's how they live, man. It is unfortunate because I don't think there's a bottle of Cristal champagne coming for the Golden State Warriors this summer. I don't know if there's a throwaway big bottle, extravagant, star-studded prize out there for them to just go out and acquire. But it was funny. We were talking about...
What do you think of the Mavs, by the way?
The Mavs?
Speaking of the playoffs.
I believe in them more than I did the last couple of years because they're more defensive-minded. But, I mean, I thought they'd beat the Clippers. I didn't know that Kawhi would get hurt, but I thought they'd beat the Clippers. I don't think they're beating OKC, though.
Speaking of the Clippers and Kawhi, like, come on. Come on, Kawhi. Like...
Well, he just got a 3-year extension. What do you mean?
I know. We're a half decade into this. If I'm Paul George, I'm like, come on, I can't do this with you anymore, bro. I know we're boys, but dude, this injury thing has got to stop.
Does Paul George have any interest from you?
Well, again, you're talking about a player in his mid-30s.
No, you're getting younger. He's 34.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah. It
was a joke.
I don't think, well, no, but he is younger than some of the other players out there.
It's true. I mean, if I was him, I'd try and get to, if I'm any big name free agent, I'm trying to get to the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to stay in the West.
Well, the problem is, though, for a lot of these guys, and this is true for Klay Thompson, is that as you get older and you've made your money, quality of life really factors in. And you're talking about California kids. I know Klay spent some time out in Portland where his dad was with the Nuggets, and it's the reason why he went to, he was with the Trailblazers.
Yeah.
It's the reason why he went to Wazoo, right? But he's basically, he and Trace are California kids, I would say. And I'm talking about Klay's brother.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing can be held true for Paul George, who went to Fresno State. He's an LA guy. That when you're talking about, while it may make sense logistically for, guys like us, the quality of life really factors in when you get to your mid-30s and you've made all the money in the world. It's like, where do I want to wake up every day? I know I might have a better chance of winning that title with Philadelphia or someone in the East, or Orlando seems to be a perfect, a suitable place not only for Klay but for Paul George. But I really think that we don't take into account enough, at least, just where they're at in terms of how they want to live their life, especially at this age.
That's a good point, especially when you know you're going to be making $45 or $50 million anyways. Klay Thompson's in a different place, but I also think that's why I kind of just think the Warriors are going to find some common ground with him. I don't know if it's the $18 million that you were throwing out earlier. I think it's closer to 25, but I'm just not sure also because this goes to the conversation we're having previously about what the greatest need is. And Steve Kerr's mentioned size. You've talked about getting younger. I think they need a star. They need shooting. Like then that is one thing. We're looking at the first round of these playoffs. The teams that have been successful, the OKCs, Boston, Minnesota, and Denver. To me, those are the four contenders. That I wouldn't be shocked if either any of those four teams won the title. Maybe OKC would be at the bottom of that. But what do they have? They have shooting everywhere. They're so hard. It's so hard to guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Number one, because he's an animal. But number two, because he can kick it to four shooters that are on the floor. Chet Holmgren's a unicorn, but if you have 3 or 4 shooters that surround your number one, it makes their life significantly easier. And Klay Thompson's the only guy that I trust to knock down a 3. He also could go 0 for 10 in a play-in game, but he's the only guy over the course of a regular season I trust to make threes at a volume level that's currently on this roster. So unless they can go out and find 1 or 2, and they might need to anyways, even if they re-sign Klay, but unless they can go out and find multiple shooters, I think Klay Thompson's got to be on the team.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think that to that degree, he has the leverage. The Warriors, in a lot of ways, they sort of have the hammer in this relationship. And when it comes to, okay, well, I will leave since you're not going to pay me, but who's going to shoot the ball for you? The Warriors clearly have to address that need. Not only do they have to get bigger at that point, now you got to go find shooters. Because it just can't be Steph all the time. Because that becomes your only legitimate, consistent shooter on this basketball. By the way, speaking of shooting, are we seeing the return? And maybe I don't mean to make this Knicks central, but
oh boy,
the return of maybe the two and not necessarily being so reliant on the three and just sort of this feast or famine world of the NBA that we've lived in over the last decade. Is Jalen Brunson saying it's okay to shoot the mid-range? Is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander saying it's okay to shoot the mid-range? Like, is Daryl Morey becoming the dinosaur, I hope, here in all of this? Or are we still just, it's all, you got to have the three. It's, go out and shoot the three.
I think the team that will answer your question is Boston, because I think Boston just shoots a ridiculous amount of 3-point shots.
Yeah.
I mean, they remind me of the Daryl Morey Rockets more so than any team in the league. OKC has a bunch of young guys, but they have, I think, like at one point this year they had 6 or 7 dudes shooting over 40% from three. So that's a strength of their team. They're the number one 3-point shooting team in the league. Boston, I think, it's just a math game. Like, if we take enough and we make league average, combined with our defense and our switchability on that end of the floor, no one's beating us. I mean, that's why they won 64 games this year. I don't know if that works in the postseason. So you're right.
Indiana's very similar as well.
I don't know if there's a return of the two, but I think that every year around this time, you figure out that what you do best, the other team's trying to take away from you. And so if you're a primarily 3-point shooting team, naturally, you're going to be given more opportunities in the mid-range. Brunson is someone who I just think he's just hard to stop. He's hard to guard.
His footwork is crazy for a guy who's like, what? That's the thing about those Villanova guys. They're all like 6'4". Nobody comes out of that program that's a big. By the way,
they all know how to play too.
Before we move, Thibodeau is it's all heart, man. It's all just about not Josh Hart, but it's literally just about it's scrapping and defense, and it's just about extra possessions. And before we move off on the playoffs and get back into the Warriors or the Niners or the Giants, I do want to recognize a player, because oftentimes the playoffs provide a platform for a coming out party. And my man, Ev, we are witnessing what could be the ascension of, he's already a star, but a guy who could take over the league and be the next. There's always the torches handed down from Michael Jordan to LeBron, from Kobe to whomever.
I know where you're going.
Yeah, Anthony Edwards is clearly making a name for himself as being, this is my league, man. And it's not necessarily what he does on the floor, but this dude's attitude is so raw. Like, he doesn't play the game. I don't think he knows how to make small talk and saying, yeah, we gave 100%. He wants to kill everybody that's in front of him. He's got the most Jordan-esque mentality I've seen, more so than LeBron, even Kobe to a certain degree. This guy is cut from a different cloth. All I'm saying is keep an eye on this guy in the postseason, because this might be his playground to say, you know what, this is my world right now.
Well, and that's why I can't wait for that series to start, because I also think it's the barometer that the Warriors need to use. Whoever wins that series, Minnesota and Denver, I think those are the two best teams in the West. I know that OKC was the number 1 seed. I think those are the two best teams in the West. I personally believe whoever comes out of that series is going to win the championship. So how close are you to them? Or how much of a gap can you close? I don't think you can get to them. But how much of a gap can you close? Because you're right. Anthony Edwards, 22? That guy
22 years old.
That guy ain't going anywhere. He just dropped 2 40 burgers in a sweep of a guy that, of course, we've been talking about, and I would like to acquire in Kevin Durant, but that's neither here nor there. Anthony Edwards is a monster, and he's someone that I believe could absolutely pick up the torch that the older generation we're beginning to see have now been faded out, because we began the show with talking about how LeBron, Durant, Paul George, Lillard, Harden, Jimmy Butler, all those guys
Steph
are one
Curry.
and done. Well, Curry didn't make the playoffs,
Yeah,
but I'm saying the guys that got bounced in the first round. Anthony Edwards, this is a legacy series potentially for him. I think also because last year, I don't know how you felt, Dan, but I think the Nuggets, that was their toughest series, the first round series against the T-Wolves. So,
yes.
And this could be a preview of years to come.
And he is just off the charts as far as he is. You talk about a two-way player. This guy cares on defense. He's got that same winning mentality. Just to sort of answer your question, when you talk about using Denver and Minnesota as sort of this barometer for the Golden State Warriors, pun intended, but light years. You're light years away. Not light years ahead. You're light years away.
Yeah, it is interesting how they went from light years ahead to feeling light years behind, and it happened in just about 2 years. But that's how quickly things can change in the NBA, and also maybe the reason for optimism, because things can flip back in your favor very quickly if you make the right moves. Let's get out to Mark in Millbrae. He's got a couple of ideas about the Golden State Warriors moves. Mark, how you doing, man? You're on with Evan and Dan on 95.7 The Game.
Hey, what's up, guys? Yeah, to me, looking at the landscape of the offseason here, I think Clay, I'm gonna gamble say he's gonna end up re-signing Lakeup, is gonna just make it happen, make sure he retires a lifetime Warrior. But to me, I'm looking at a perfect couple of guys who I think the Warriors makes them right back to contenders. To me, a guy like, I know it's gonna take a while, but I think he's perfect for the Warriors. Pascal Siakam, he's a free agent. You look at his game, I think you put him on the front line with his Warriors. He can play off the ball. He can score, create his own shot. He can rebound, plays defense, and he can be a wingman where he doesn't need to have the ball because he can create and he can get a lot of those garbage points around the rim. I'm looking at a guy like him. To me, I think the guy they wanted to trade for last year, but unfortunately, it looks like he's going to remain in New York, is OG Anunoby. You look at what he's doing with the Knicks, and we know the Warriors wanted him at the trade deadline before the Knicks swooped and took him. And then if we can't land somebody of that, or if that's out of their price range, I wanted to get your opinions on two more guys. I think Malik Monk, you look what he did with Sacramento. That guy is an elite scorer, shooter. He'd be perfect. He could play off Curry. You can bring him off the bench. You could start him. I think that guy could thrive in either position there in the backcourt. And then another guy, I know he's older, but I think you look at his game, he's never gets injured, efficient score, mid-range, can take it to the rack. I think a guy like DeMar DeRozan, you play him off him, he can take the pressure off Curry. The guy, I know he's in his early 30s, but still the guy averages, 24, 25 a game. I think a guy like him would be perfect because I just think Durant at this point, he's past his prime. The injury factor, and I think the salary contract demands and what Phoenix will want is just unattainable to me. So what are your guys' perspective on those three guys who I think would be perfect fit for the Warriors and guys that can attainable? Thanks for the time.
I mean, I'll be watching and paying close attention to Malik Monk because I think that's the range that Klay Thompson might be assessing as well, because I think Klay is best used as a bench player or sixth man from here on out. So I don't think Malik Monk is possible for the Warriors. Paul George, you'd have to swing a sign and trade. I know some people that feel good about him. I don't think he moves the needle enough for me. I really think it's, to me, Dan, if they can't get Kevin Durant, I don't know if there's another big move out there, well, unless you're telling me like Giannis is available. But of the aging stars, it's KD or bust for me.
Yeah, I kind of like DeMar DeRozan, but he's not the answer. Speaking of bringing back the two, he's another guy that sort of lives in the mid-range.
Led the league in minutes.
Yeah, DeMar DeRozan I think would be a good fit, but he's not putting you over the top. It makes you better, but it's not putting you over the top. And then of course it gets down to price tags when it comes to these guys. And in all this, we have to keep in mind how Joe Lacob wants to reduce his payroll. So the idea again of bringing in Kevin Durant at $55 million per is what really sort of complicates things. I'm just once again to reiterate where this whole thing kicked off, that I am not a fan of bringing in an old basketball player on and adding to what is already your biggest problem, is you're too old. Makes absolutely no sense.
What about someone, before we wrap up here, someone like Evan Ingram? It was reported by Evan Siddery of Forbes Sports that the Pelicans are not expected to offer Ingram a contract extension this offseason. He is eligible to sign a $4 $200 million deal, but they'd like to re-sign or extend Trey Murphy III, so it points to New Orleans prioritizing Murphy over Ingram, and he could possibly be available for $36 million.
I mean, I'd entertain it. But again, if you're looking for the piece that's going to be, that Kevin Durant, but not Kevin Durant, it's not Ingram. The thing about Brandon Ingram is that he can be really good, and he can also really disappear on you. He has not been a consistent basketball player. And again, this is my personal take. Even when he came in with the Lakers, you could see the promise, and he got the opportunity to blossom out there with New Orleans. But there's just something about his game that I could never buy into. And yes, he can carry you at times, but he also, if you follow Ingram and just talk to people in New Orleans, he goes away, man. And there are times when inexplicably you don't even know he's on the floor. There's just some, I wouldn't consider him as just we talked about Anthony Edwards. He's sort of the antithesis of a player like Anthony Edwards, just from a mental makeup standpoint. Just from a personal standpoint, I'm sort of out on the guy.
Yeah, 925 Xfinity mobile text line. We were talking about Brandon Ingram. I don't think he shoots the three ball well enough for me to go out and trade, because I think you'd have to include Wiggins and Kuminga in all probability, and I don't know if I'm willing to give up on Kuminga for Ingram. This is from Uncle Looney in the YouTube chat, powered by First Cal Credit Union. How about you trade Wiggs for 1 year of Capella? I don't know if it's Capella necessarily, but I like the thought process. I think someone like Wiggins you're going to have to give up to take someone back who's an extremely flawed player, and you would look at whoever you bring back in as salary filler. That is someone who could come off the books. It's one of the reasons why I thought they should have traded him at the deadline for somebody that could come off the books at the end of this season. Now you're going to have to wait a year in order to do that. But perhaps the Warriors also feel like there's nothing out there worth giving up on Andrew Wiggins for. I think that 3 years of him from now until then is too long for me. So, and this is really what it boils down to, Dan, as we wind down here. There's so many different decisions that they have to make. I'm not sure which one they prioritize, but if you press the wrong button, you could set yourself back even further. And it feels like there's a lot of trap doors this summer.
It's not necessarily a trap door. It's right in front of you. It's the front door. And if you let Kevin Durant walk through it, then you're setting yourself up for failure. That's going to set the organization back simply because you're giving up way too much. If you're Phoenix and you're Matt Ishbia, who I don't think is going to trade Kevin Durant to begin with, I think he still believes he can bring back that core. But if you're going to trade him, you're going to want a boatload, including draft picks, including your kids, and that becomes the issue with the Golden State Warriors when you think about their future.
Well, we've gotten into a lot today. I mean, we talked about your exclusive one-on-one with Mark Cuban.
Can we wrap up where we started here?
Yeah, let's do it. Oh, that's right. With the list for Ricky Pearsall.
So I was looking out of my periphery here, and I do see something that's legit. They got Liguria Bakery, which is the best focaccia in town. Thank you very much for actually putting something on here that is rather legitimate that I would recommend to Ricky Pearsall. The rest of this stuff, I'm like, as my aunt in Hawaii would say, I'm wiping my akole with it. But go to the wharf? Really? Go to the wharf is number 3? My God. Walk the Golden Gate Bridge. Drive down Lombard Street. Do that when you're 55 and you're like in San Francisco for an hour. This is not what I would recommend for Ricky Pearsall.
Everything that is included on our list, and no disrespect to the morning show.
Where's Grizzly Peak?
That's in Oakland.
Oh, well, that's why I don't know it.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, everything in the East Bay Dan's off of. You know what Lake Merritt is, Dan?
I do know.
It's not Lake Chabot. Or what? I don't even know the lake over by the zoo. What's that, Lake Chalet?
And Zushi Puzzle?
I don't know what that is.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff going on here that I feel like as a San Francisco... Why do I keep saying that? You're a San Francisco native, but you're an East Coast guy.
No, I'm a city guy.
You are New York.
No, I'm San Francisco. I tell you what, young player, Ricky Pearsall, just hang out with my man Ev and me, for that matter. We'll take you over to.
We'll bring you down to the Triangle. Get you down to Balboa Cafe.
Get you wet your beak a little bit.
Yeah,
and then we'll take you to some places. It doesn't always have to be. It can be about food.
Get you a bottle of Cristal.
Yeah,
Cristal. Mark Cuban's favorite. Walking around popping them like Coors Lights. That's my kind of yellow belly.
How about a sandwich from Molinari's?
Ho! Jersey Ken!
Yeah.
Oh, to the alley. Run, fella, run.
Right off Broadway,
Green Lantern,
baby.
bring him home. That is the best sandwich in the city. Molinari's, best deli. How did you find that?
In the red light?
So we used to work right like a few blocks up,
on Broadway.
It's off Broadway.
Columbus.
It used to be where the Stinkin' Rose old location
in North Beach?
Yeah, North Beach.
Oh, yeah.
Molinari's I used to been going to that place since I was a child.
Very good.
Man.
Very, very authentic Italian. And it's hard to,
the prosciutto hanging from the rooftops.
Fresh
It's the real deal, man.
I'll have to get out there. In fact, I might be heading there next. But we'll send you back to your regularly scheduled Fox Sports programming. Dan, it's been fun, my man. I look forward to next week.
No doubt. Thank
All
you.
right. For Dan Devone, for New Jersey Ken, for our guy Jay in the back, my name is Evan Giddings saying so long. Appreciate you listening to this edition of Saturdays with Evan Giddings and Dan Devone back on 95.7 The Game. Have a good weekend, everyone.
If I stood up and said, "Hey, Ev, what time's the show Saturday?" Would you be able to hear me?
Are you facing eviction or homelessness in San Francisco? EDC Radco offers rental assistance to eligible residents through the San Francisco Emergency Rental Assistance Program, SFE RAP. Get help with moving costs,